Hi, everyone, and welcome to TalentTrack, our first ever virtual conference. My name is Carly Miller, and I'll be moderating this event today. Before we dive into all of the exciting sessions we have lined up for you, I just want to touch on a few things. First off, on behalf of the entire Track 5 team, I just want to say thank you to all the speakers and all of you in the audience for being here today. We've been working super hard behind the scenes for months to bring TalentTrack to life, and today is really the culmination of all of that effort, so we are pumped to have you all here. I was joking with the speakers during the planning process that TalentTrack is like our normal Track 5 webinars on steroids. We put together a jam-packed 4-hour event complete with 5 sessions that cover the topics you care about most, and 14 outstanding expert speakers who are ready to share their insights. So whether you've been in the healthcare recruiting space for decades or you're brand new to the industry, there's something here for everyone. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items to cover. This entire event is being recorded, so no worries if you can't catch everything live. Each of you will have access to a video replay of the sessions once the conference is over, and we'll also be posting the full video on our YouTube channel, so you'll have plenty of opportunities to rewatch anything you might have missed. We also have a live chat running, so please feel free to make use of it throughout the day. One of our fantastic team members, Nora, will be living in the chat throughout the entire event and passing along your questions for our speakers to answer at the end of each session if there's time. One last thing for those of you who might not be familiar with Track 5, hi. We are a recruitment marketing agency and we own several healthcare career platforms, including TravelNurseSource, AlliedTravelCareers, and LocumJobsOnline. We're really lucky to have a lot of our clients joining the panels today or tuning in the audience. We're so happy you're here. But if you're new to us and want to learn more, drop a message in the chat and we'll be sure to touch base with you. And now it's officially time to kick off session 1. I'm going to pull up my fun little graphic here. You get a sneak peek of the speakers while I do this. Okay, we're starting the day strong with an incredible session titled What's Now and What's Next in Travel Healthcare. This session is going to be a deep dive into the current state of the travel healthcare industry, as well as a look at where the industry is headed next. Joining us for this session, we're thrilled to welcome Holly and Kenny, both fantastic representatives from NATHO. So Holly and Kenny, thank you for letting me hijack the beginning of your session. I know the audience is really eager to learn from you, so I'll turn things over to you now to introduce yourselves and get us started.
All right. Thank you so much, Carly, and thank you so much for having us today. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Holly Bass. I'm the Executive Director for NATHO. I started off as a recruiter in this industry 24 years ago. I went on to be the president of PPR Healthcare Staffing and PPR Travel Nursing. And then via an acquisition, I went on to be Executive Vice President of Recruitment for Medical Solutions. So I've been around a long time and I'm excited to be here today representing NATHO. And I'd like to turn it over to Kenny to introduce himself as well.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you guys all today. My name is Kenny Kadar. I am the president and owner of Coast Medical Service. We are a healthcare staffing agency. Been around since 1979, founded by my mom. So I grew up with the business, been in the industry my whole life. Serve as president and owner of Coast. We staff nurses and allied nationwide. I also had the pleasure of serving as NATHO's president over the past year and now am officially past president. So excited to be with you all today.
Great, thanks, Kenny. So Holly, if you just want to kick us off.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I always love Kenny's story about how he grew up and how he now owns and runs the company. I think that's awesome. All right, so on our first slide, if you want to go ahead and get us going, Carly. So you're going to see in today's slides that we have some partnership with SIA on our slides and our content. We partner with SIA on several projects throughout the year. We have an annual benchmarking survey that we work with them on, as well as a trends and insights report that we work with them on, and that's all for our NATHO members. And we're going to talk a little bit about NATHO and what we do later, but we did want to, let you know that we do partner with them. You'll see some of our slides are co-branded, and they do work with us both with our conference and throughout the year. So we wanted to make sure that we said a special thank you to SIA. So NATHO, we're hot off our annual conference where we bring industry leaders together each year. At our conference, we offer roundtables, subject matter expert speakers, networking opportunities, and we give an industry update, everything from market conditions to the legal and governmental landscape, as well as technology. So we had a lot of takeaways from the conference this year, and we're going to focus on those takeaways today, and really just going to give you some highlights and headlines from the conference. Starting off with our first slide today, we're not going to go in any particular order. We're going to jump around a little bit, kind of informally. But here are the things that we were really talking about at the conference and that people were discussing and comparing notes. And the first thing that came to mind is really job orders. I remember back in the day when I would track KPIs, the job order stat was usually the #1 indicator on whether or not we were in a good market. Well, things have changed because right now jobs are steady, demand is strong, but unfortunately that's not quite indicative of where the market is or where the market has been over the last couple of years. But overall demand is there, and we are seeing orders pretty consistent across the board, and that's what we hear from our members. Placements and revenue. Where are the placements coming from? Well, we found out through our benchmarking survey that most of our placements are all now running through VMS and MSP platforms. And I've seen this stat reported a couple of different ways, and it really ranges between 70 and 80% of your revenue these days is now flowing through MSP and VMS platforms. So now more than ever, it's really important that the healthcare staffing companies remain really relevant, have great relationships with all the third parties, and have great partnerships. So just something to make sure that you're focused on and working on, because that's the bulk of where the revenue and placements are flowing through these days. One of my favorite quotes from the conference back in April was, "Flat is the new up and to the right," right? We were like, we all kind of giggled, but that's kind of how we feel. We are seeing stabilization in the marketplace. We are seeing normalization in our results. But at the same time, there are some companies, even though it's June, we were hoping to start seeing a more upward trajectory with revenue, headcount. But unfortunately, we are still hearing some companies are going backwards. Some are holding, and some are starting to see moderate growth. So depending on where you are in that range, we do see and hear a little bit of everything. On the good news front, overdue AR is improving, and AR is getting better for our healthcare staffing companies. So if you and your team are not experiencing a better result in DSO, I would work with your team immediately, because you want to benefit from that too. A hot topic, of course, at our conference and probably everywhere that we see is AI. And it's really the power of AI and technology. What we found is that some companies haven't even started using AI, and other companies are really off running already. So one thing that we found is that companies really aren't looking to, and we've heard this before too, aren't looking to replace staff with AI. They're looking to create workflows and use AI agents and platforms in ways that really enhance and complement their teams and make them more efficient. So where we see this technology is really plugging in is in candidate sourcing, candidate engagement, and candidate screening. That's where we're seeing the bulk of AI being used. So we wanted to share that with you today. Of course, M&A, we're seeing a lot of market and brand consolidation, mergers and acquisitions. You see a lot of activity in this area. You have Aya buying cross country. We saw Unity Med and GQR last year. And then most recently, in the last week or so, we saw Travel Nurse Across America and Total Med joining forces. So we think that you're going to see more of that potentially over the next year or two, because when you join forces, you're more impactful together. You can leverage those partnerships, be more impactful with clients, with all of those, all that revenue and those jobs all funneling through MSPs and VMS platforms. You can be more relevant with clients, and maybe go from tier 3 to tier 2 or tier 2 to tier 1. So the opportunity to leverage those relationships, create more efficiencies, and just be more impactful in the industry. We're definitely seeing some of that. The good news too is the supply and demand trajectory is still going in the right way for our industry. You'll find we're going to show a slide later where we talk about supply is still down, but demand is still up. And that's where our industry really plugs in and helps with things. So I always say sometimes it's bad for healthcare delivery when there's this gap, but it's good for us in contingent labor because we go out and help solve that gap. Projections for 2026, you're going to see us share a slide that's going to show you some recent growth predictions for our market in 2026, where it stands today. Obviously, this always changes and it could change quite a bit from now until the end of the year. But we are hoping we're finally going to see some very, very small, but some single-digit growth into 2026. And not listed on this slide because, again, I told you we're hopping around a little bit and it's a little organic. But another topic that we were discussing at our conference is continuation and us seeing reduction in force and layoffs in our industry. Just when we thought the dust had kind of settled on that topic, we are constantly hearing and seeing waves of reductions coming through. Thought it had kind of ended last year, but we did see the beginning of this year and even as of a couple of weeks ago, that we are seeing waves of reductions continuing. And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, where are the jobs going? And that leads kind of to that next topic, which is offshoring. Some of the jobs are going away because we have volume issues. We don't have the same volume that we did when we had all that staff. But also some jobs, particularly in the back office and the support roles, are being offshored. And obviously that's done to be competitive, keep costs down, keep SG&A down, and still be able to provide technology and people where we need to leverage it, but also keep those costs down. There's lots of platforms and different vendors out there that offer offshoring services. So if you're not doing that, we're finding that's quite a trend as well. And another trend that we're seeing is companies are still wanting to hire really great recruiters. And I read an article last week that talked a lot about, hey, there's, when you talk to candidates, they want to have the opportunity to utilize technology. Hey, yeah, anybody can upload a certification. Anybody can go in and upload a timesheet using technology. But when it's time to talk about a new assignment, understand a facility, get up and move 3,000 miles from your home, they still want to talk to somebody and they still want a relationship with the recruiter. And that's really great news for our industry. And then going to the next slide, margins is always a topic because we're still seeing quite a compression in margins. When you look at the complicated relationship and friction between bill rates and client expectations, candidate expectations and pay, inflation, housing costs, et cetera, they all play into those margin compressions that we're all still seeing. Hopefully we'll start seeing those go up a little bit as we've made changes to back office. We've made changes to the way we run our businesses. So that was a topic. And then difficult to fill orders. A lot of travelers and clinicians we're hearing are all being very selective about what jobs they will and will not take, which is what's happening right now is they won't leave their home unless it's the perfect set of circumstances, the right job at the right price, at the right pay, and the right time. And so we have to keep working to bring those true travelers back into the industry. Otherwise, we're finding jobs are just remaining unfilled, and the hard to fill jobs also, they're just in the rural areas are also remaining unfilled. And this all led to a little common consensus too, especially on the benchmarking survey, was that recruiter and account management productivity continues to be down. Look, these are highly motivated, money-driven, commission-driven salespeople that are also struggling in this market. Companies are still expecting the same type of activities in return, but it's tougher out there between working from home, I call it like less traffic out there to direct as far as leads or as far as, candidates to work with or finding the right job for them or the right fit. It's tougher out there. So it's definitely created, I think, a lot of stress for that group of people too. And then also we're going to show you a slide on quit rates for nurses. It's down quite a bit. And when it reached its highest, the peak of COVID, we're now starting to see quit rates reduce back to nurses quit rates back to pre-COVID levels. So that's a good thing. All right, and now onto the next slide. Thank you, Carly. If you want to know or be reminded, what is the size of our market? What is the size of healthcare staffing? And you can see this year we're projected to be right around just under $41 billion. And you look back where it came from back in 2010, and we were 8 billion. So that's quite a run. And when we were at the NATHO conference, we had an inspirational speaker, Sean Ellis. He did a lot of research on the industry so that he could understand our audience, understand the challenges that we're facing. And he kind of said, Holly, if you were to kind of put your fingers and hide 21, 22, and 23, those anomaly years, that is still an incredible growth trajectory when you look at 2020 to 2024. It's like 60% growth. And I said, yeah, but it still just doesn't feel that good as you've been in it the last couple of years. But I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective that I think all of us would have taken that type of growth if we didn't know any better and gone through kind of the hard times that we have gone through over the last couple of years. So kind of interesting there. So on the next slide, we think about our market. Well, how is it segmented out? And I think this slide does a good job of showing how that is segmented out. You can see that Allied and Locums are both around 10 billion of that 40 billion. Per diem nurse is right around 5.2. And of course, travel nursing still takes up the bulk of close to 16 billion and is the largest segment by far. So good snapshot there of how things are divided out. All right, and on the next slide, we show this. I mentioned this earlier, how the supply and demand is still going to be there. This is a great graphic, I think, that shows the orange line is the demand and the blue line is the supply. And you can see 12, 15 years out that there's still a shortage, which that's where we come in. That's where we come in and solve those problems. So to me, this shows us that there's still an opportunity for our industry. There's still going to be a gap in filling orders and open orders. There's still going to be a need for the travel market. We're still relevant. And it's up to us to continue to move that labor pool around to fill those hard to fill orders and high demand areas. And that's where we really come in and shine. So important there. All right, on to the next slide. Here, I mentioned earlier that a lot of our revenue is now running through MSPs and VMSs. And you can see back in 2018, 58% of our revenue was running through. Now, this particular slide shows 73%. And then the pie graph does a nice job of showing if you're a company, how does that break out for you? And obviously this can vary based on whether or not you have an MSP or you don't have an MSP. But anyway, I've also seen this on another survey where it was closer to 80%, also depending on the type of company that you are, or if you have your own MSP. So we wanted to kind of highlight this and also show you the graph behind it. All right, and then on the next slide, I mentioned those pre-COVID level quit rates. You can see that nurses were quitting at an all-time high back in 2021, 2022. And then they started to come down in 2023, and they're continuing to come down. So on a percentage basis point, you can see that nurses are staying in the field now longer. They're not leaving their jobs as quickly. And this is also good because it keeps more of them in the marketplace for all of us. So I thought that was an important stat to share with you too, also from the conference. And then on the next slide, where's healthcare going? We hear a lot about it's going home. Healthcare is going home. They're pushing out of acute care. They're pushing patients out of the hospital. And that's true, but it's not always going to the home setting. This is essentially what is called a site of care volumes forecast for the next 10 years. And it kind of breaks down different areas of where healthcare is going. So for example, emergency department, not a lot of change. Inpatient, not a lot of change. Skilled nursing facilities, projected to go down. Hospital and ambulatory centers, it's projected to go up. I would be looking at this slide from the lens of if I was going to get into a new area, a new segment, or a new space, this might be a good guide to show you where the forecast is where the forecast is going over the next 10 years. Home up 20%, retail down, office and clinic settings up, but look at the virtual, 26% of all of that evaluation and management of healthcare and the volumes and the settings will be done virtually in a virtual setting. So really interesting information. And I thought this was a great snapshot to show everybody kind of where healthcare is going, what the settings look like, the acuity levels and everything. So Kenny, I think that this is actually where I turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Holly. Nice job. So I had some staffing company updates just to keep us all in the loop of what's going on. Holly touched on some of them. One of the biggest recent ones is the passing of Alan Brainin from Aya. As you guys know, Aya has really accelerated their growth over the last several years. They've become the largest company in our industry. That was largely, driven by Alan, who's no longer with us. So huge news in our industry and something to keep an eye on, ongoing. There's also been a lot of consolidation, as Holly mentioned. She talked about the TNAA Total Med merger. Those are two of the largest companies in our space. They decided to partner together. I think that's a big one to keep an eye on. And then also in the mid-market, you see a lot of moves. Recently, CareCareer announced an acquisition of 4 companies: Alliant, MedUS, Amare, NextMove, bringing those companies closer to like 100 million, I believe, combined. So you're seeing consolidation on like the larger companies, on the mid-sized companies. And then beyond that, you're continuing to see layoffs and shakeups across the board. Holly touched on that. You thought you might be past that in the market, but it's still happening. So there's like a lot of movement happening in the marketplace, which represents an opening for all of us if we can find the right opportunities. And then going to the next slide, Carly, I kind of wanted to just summarize. Holly gave a lot of good information, about, where the market is at. From my perspective, this is sort of how I look at it. The industry has declined for this is going to be the 3rd year in a row. We all feel that. We're all living through that. Our teams are living through that. Holly talked about, our salespeople, the recruiters, the account managers, the ones who are really heavily commission-based, they're feeling that as well. But all that said, when you look at the chart, the industry is up over the last, 10, 15 years. The trend line continues to be up. And there's a lot of opportunity there. So while we all feel that, we should all feel the rise of the industry as well. And, I can speak for ourselves, we're significantly further advanced today than we were, in 2011 when I started in this industry. I also want to highlight the MSPs. They continue to win business. They're 80% of our market when you include VMS as well. That is something that cannot be denied and something that we all have to account for, when we're looking at our strategy and our business planning and how we want to grow. The recruiting challenges we're facing are real. Lead generation has become more challenging. Agencies are finding it more difficult to attract candidates. I think during COVID, when you're offering $10,000 a week, it's a very easy decision for somebody to take it. It's like that meme where it's like, fuck this, I'm out, and they throw the papers everywhere, right? Well, that's not exactly happening anymore, right? I mean, we're still offering pretty substantial pay rates and generally rates that are higher than what, a clinician can make full time, but it's not that FU money that we were seeing before. And so thus, it's just a little bit more challenging to attract candidates. And it's not only money, it's other things that, will ultimately make the deal. And as a result of that, we're seeing the margin compression. There's increased competition. A lot of companies have really scaled up, during the high growth period. And so they're, fighting to essentially, keep their market share. And that's led to, margin compression, lower profitability overall on deals, also coupled with sort of lower bill rates that we're facing as well. So that's kind of how I would summarize it. Now, the next question is okay, knowing all that, what do you do about it? So Carly, next slide, please. And really the key is, ultimately to be, sort of honest with yourself, identify what you're good at. Where do you have a competitive advantage? Is it geographically? Is it with a certain facility type? Is it with a certain shift type or unit? Are you really good with, ICU nurses, or are you good at therapy or imaging or whatever it may be? Really identify where you can win, where you can have a competitive advantage. Identify the clients that need help in that area. So, it could be a big health system. It could be, surgery centers. It could be home care, long-term care, whatever it may be. But there are a lot of different delivery options out there, and really getting good at identifying where you can win, and then focus on that. Really go deep. Focus on, lead generation for, that area you have a competitive advantage. focus on the client relationships where you have that and keep building on that and scaling there. And then also being disciplined about saying no to the opportunities where you can't win. So like if you're really focused on therapy and a place, you know, a client comes to you and says, hey, can you do ICU nurses? You might want to say no if you can't, right? We've really been trying to be focused on, you know, the areas we can be good and where we feel like we can win, but also not focused on the areas where we can't win. And I think, you know, there are still opportunities in this market. The overall industry has faced growth, but there are a lot of challenges that we're facing as well. And so really being focused, being honest with yourself, and being focused on where you can generate candidate quality and where you have those quality relationships will ultimately lead to wins for everybody. There are still opportunities to win. While the market has been rocky, there are companies that are doing well in this market, and there are companies that aren't, right? And so I think if you can apply the market updates in this fashion, you can be one of those companies that can show growth. And then one of the other things is just, you know, attending things like this, you know, keeping your ear to the street. Joining NATHO has been huge for us. You know, making sure that you have a pulse of the market, that you're building the relationships that you need to build on. NATHO is a great place to do that. And I'll pass it back to Holly to share more about NATHO.
Thanks, Kenny. Throwing me a softball here to pitch NATHO to everybody. Well, for anybody on the call that is a member of NATHO, thank you so much for your support and membership. You do really help keep the industry going. And for those of you who are not a member of NATHO, we really would love to have you. We're really making waves. We're really, over the last couple of years, created more of a community feel versus a trade organization feel. We're very passionate about what we do. And although I'm working for NATHO now, I was on the board of NATHO for 5 years and also a past president. So I really have always believed in what we did and what we have to offer. We do offer networking and collaboration opportunities, resources, education. We have several committees in place that you can join. We have monthly roundtables. We've got some webinars planned for the rest of the year. And like I mentioned at the very beginning, we also partner with SIA on several data, like the data surveys and benchmarking surveys, as well as the Trends and Insights report, which is taking data that you and others give us and putting it together. We have a new state regulatory guide that probably might be worth the membership alone, particularly for smaller companies who can't have an in-house counsel. With all the reporting and changes that are required state by state, we now offer that as part of our membership. And then also a part of your membership is free access at no charge to our annual conference. We did just have our annual conference in April, but we already have next year's date set, and it's May 7th and 8th in Las Vegas. We'll be putting more information out about that as it gets a little bit closer. But if anybody ever has any questions or suggestions or membership, anything that you need, you can always email me at executivedirector@natho.org. Carly, before we hand it back to you, we just also want to say thank you for being a great partner with us, prepping us, helping us make sure our slides look great, and putting us in a good spot today. So thank you so much for your partnership today as well.
Thank you, Holly and Kenny. I really enjoyed this presentation, and we have some NATHO fans in the chat, and I'm not surprised because this was so much valuable information. I was talking with Holly and Kenny in the waiting room earlier. Our team got to go to the NATHO conference this year, and they came back with so much knowledge. We actually had an entire lunch and learn in the office, and this presentation just scratched the surface of all the information they learned. So we really do recommend joining NATHO. The conference is so worth it. We do have about 15 minutes of time for questions. So I saw we had some questions come in earlier. We can tackle those now, but if you're in the audience and you have any questions about the presentation or about NATHO, drop them in the chat and we'll ask them to Holly and Kenny live. But going back to some questions that came in earlier, I'm gonna go back in the slides presentation. Tim asked about a certain statistic and that was shared. I think it is here. Tim asked, is that 73% just for travel nursing, or does it apply to allied and locum as well?
That's travel nurse.
Travel nurse, yeah.
Awesome. And then we had another question.
My assumption is that it's similar for allied. I think locums is probably less, although my guess is locums will continue to go the way of travel nursing with increased MSP presence.
Cool. speaking of MSPs, we have an MSP question that Peter had asked. He had wanted to know, at what point does or will the MSP/VMS model outprice itself by increasing fees to an unsustainable point for vendor partners?
That is a tricky question. Personally, I don't see MSPs going away, and so I think that ultimately, there will be probably a come to Jesus where everybody kind of figures out a plan that sort of works. But I don't see MSPs going away, and I sort of think that that's what that question was getting at. That's not going to happen. So if you're hoping that MSPs are going to price themselves out, you can keep hoping, but that's unlikely to happen. Your better strategy is to find a way to work with them, or to alternatively go the opposite direction and don't work with them and find some of these alternative, deliveries where you can be successful. My philosophy is that if you want to play in large healthcare systems in the United States, you're working through an MSP. Like, that's just the way it is.
Thanks, Kenny. Allison had a good comment about that. She wrote, I think growing market share within key MSP programs and driving your volume with that program can help reduce the pain with the increased MSP fee. So thank you for sharing that, Allison. Keep your questions coming. We have some time here, and we have two awesome people from NATHO here ready to answer all of your burning industry questions. So please don't be shy in the chat. They are here and excited to answer all of your burning questions.
I mean, I could just dive deeper on that one. I agree with what Allison said, and that's sort of what we do too. And kind of what I was trying to get out of the slide is like, figure out where you actually have relationships that want to work with you. If you're subbing to an MSP and you're getting no response, it's like a black hole. Is that really a place to spend your time? For us, it's not. Or at least we want to try to find ways to work those relationships to be able to get the feedback that we're looking for. If you're not getting it, then you got to find a place where you are, and I think that's sometimes like the knock on MSPs is like, oh, well, I submitted people and there's this black hole. It's like, okay, well, that may be the case. And maybe that MSP isn't that interested in working with you. So it's kind of like find somebody who is, because they do exist. You just got to find it, and you got to find a way to deliver for them. Maybe what you're providing for them, they don't need. Maybe you have it, but they don't need it. So that's part of the problem. Find out what they do need and provide that, and I promise it won't be a black hole. And that's easier said than done, obviously, but that is, sort of what it takes in this market. You're not throwing darts anymore, and I think that that's kind of what people got in the habit of in COVID is like, oh, I have a candidate. Well, I'm easily going to place them because there's so many needs around the country and everybody will just take them. But that's not the case anymore.
Great. Thanks, Kenny. We have a question about NATHO. Cody in the chat wrote that he was excited to learn more about NATHO. So he's curious about the NATHO fee. He'd like to know if it's yearly or monthly.
That's a great question. Our fee is annual, and we do run a February to February membership, but anybody's welcome to join anytime, and we would be happy to prorate that membership. The fees are based on your revenue level, and we do have that on natho.org where you can look at that, look at your revenue level and see how much that annual fee is. But remember, with that annual fee comes the annual conference at no charge, and then access to all of the things I talked about and many more. So I'm happy to take like a more specific call with somebody and talk to them about everything. If you'd like to give me an email or a call, and again, executive director at natho.org, and I'd be happy to walk him through that. Thanks.
And just to add, like, I feel that NATHO is one of the best values in our industry. The cost is incredibly reasonable for all that you get. I like to tell people if you only go to the conference, you'll get way more value than you're spending. And, the cost of the NATHO membership is around or less than the cost of many conferences that you already may be attending. And so just for that alone, the value will be there, but there's so much more that we do. Joining NATHO was huge for us. We joined, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, and that was really coincided with a lot of our industry knowledge and relationships and growth.
Yeah. And specifically, depending on your membership level, it can be between $1,500 and $3,500 for the whole year. And so again, we can talk about that. You can hit the join button or give me a reach out, and I'll be happy to help and walk you through it.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Oliver. What is your prognosis for the rest of the year regarding order growth? Summer is typically slower, and are you seeing that right now?
I mean, we had, for us, and every company's different, we had a strong Q1. Q2 has been not as strong, but I wouldn't say that's an order problem. For us, it's been more of a candidate flow issue, like less leads coming in. Obviously partnering with you all at Track 5 to help with that. But less leads overall. And the quality of candidates, I think there's just less people interested in traveling. There's still a large segment of people who are, but just not quite as many as before. And so, I think for us, it's just been quality submissions that has been an issue. But overall, this year for us should be above last year, which, is against the trend that Holly had presented. So it kind of proves, I guess, that you can still, show growth in this market if you do good work ultimately. However, you could also do good work and not grow. Like there's no guarantees in anything.
True. Holly, I know you talked about how AI was a major headline this year. It feels like AI is the major headline of life lately, but Chad wants to know, what is the best use cases we are seeing using AI for lead gen and AI agents?
I'll be honest, I think people are kind of keeping that close to the vest. The companies that are out ahead are not really as forthcoming in sharing what they're doing or how they're using it. But I think I mentioned earlier that candidate engagement, candidate screening, and sourcing are the areas where we are seeing AI being used the most. There's AI agents that also can do back office tasks. There's AI now where you can also build your own workflows with your own team and then utilize AI. And again, that's all to complement and to gain more efficiencies within the team. Kenny, from an end user standpoint, you might have a little bit more data on that, but that's kind of just what we're hearing. But again, it's so all over the place. I think people that are ahead of the game are kind of keeping what they're doing to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's basic AI like ChatGPT. I mean, everybody should be using that for sure, and we certainly do. We've looked at a lot of different programs. There's a back office one that we're going to be going live with that can help, significantly streamline things on the back office. We are doing some stuff on the candidate side, though. For us, I think we're more of a boutique agency, if you will, and so those quality of relationships is really important for us. So we're very careful, I guess, about what interaction AI or even offshore, which we use, interacts with our candidates. I will say from my perspective, I do feel like AI is still very expensive. We've looked at a lot of programs and like people are less expensive than the AI and they can be better and do more things. And so that's sort of like the question we're asking is like, can we hire somebody for less or the same and can they do more? And in many cases, the answer is yes, still today. Now, I do think that over time, as AI continues to advance and the technology continues to get better, the cost will also go down and those answers will probably be no at some point. But today, that's not the case. And so I'd encourage you guys to really do a cost comparison on AI because oftentimes, yeah, it's shiny and everybody's talking about it and there's a lot of hype behind it, but is it actually better? Not always.
Yeah, awesome. We probably have time for a couple more questions. I want to ask this one that Oliver had thrown in. What are your thoughts on the growing allied therapy segment and locum as well? A lot of agencies are thinking about expanding into these markets. And then I guess a follow-up question to that as well. How does that differ from travel nursing? Because you can't recruit the same way for travel nursing as you can for allied and locum.
We have a big allied presence. We really invested heavily into that, I'd say starting 4 years ago. And so we have, quite a bit of material and training and things like that around our team to help. It is different for sure. I would say it's more similar to nursing than locums, which we've also looked into. Locums is significantly different. Locums requires a different insurance. Typically, you'd have to have a different company to do that. Couldn't put it under this. I mean, there's ways to do it, but like, typically requires different insurance, different, company name, things of that nature. And locums, as I looked into it, is a lot more per diem-y than you think. So like, while it's very far in advance, it's often like, oh, one shift here, one shift there, and the dollars are very big, significantly bigger than, what we see in nursing and allied, but the delivery is significantly different. And the lead time is also longer. There's a lot more compliance documentation needed. And anybody in our space knows that there's already a lot of compliance, but with locums, it's even more. So it's certainly doable, but you do need to be prepared to have, for it to be different, significantly different, that you would need to figure out new processes, new workflows, likely new vendors, and a lot of different things. It's not like a plug and play by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank you, Kenny. And then our next question is from David. He wants to know any thoughts on how to prescriptively direct candidates to those jobs you are specifically trying to fill versus just all the jobs you have available.
That's a good question. I think, we could all do a better job with that. For us, I mean, it starts with how you're getting the candidates, right? So like, sure, if a candidate's coming and applies to a random job on a job board, they're going to be interested in that job. I think sourcing for the job that you're trying to fill is the number one key. So going through your database, other, databases out there, and really, targeting folks that you think could be a good fit for those type of jobs is number one. And then once, you have somebody on the phone, whether they're interested in that job or not, you certainly want to throw it out there like, hey, and you want to be, acknowledge what they're looking for. To me, it's like, you always want to understand, like, why are you doing this? What are you doing it for? What are the motivators for you? And then you kind of use those to pitch your own job. Like, hey, I know maybe speed to getting a job is important for you. If that's really important to you, here's the place where I can get you the job the fastest. And it's this targeted job. And then you throw it out there and see what they say. Do you like it or not? You can't fit a square peg into a round hole. I don't think you can force somebody to do something they don't want, but you can also lay it up in ways where it's like, hey, I know this, and this are important to you. This job has this, and this. What do you think? And try to get, some feedback that way. And if they're interested, then great. You can get a submission to a job that you think, you can get an offer on. And if they're not, at least what's important to them. And then you can start looking for jobs that meet some of those criteria.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenny. We just have about 3 minutes left, so we actually are going to stop taking questions right now. We don't want to cut into the rest of the sessions. And a lot of the questions that were asked in the chat, we actually will be covering through future sessions. So if you want to stick around, please do. I'm sure that you'll gain a lot of insights from our other speakers. But I just want to say thank you so much again, Holly and Kenny, for kicking us off. I really enjoyed this presentation, and I can tell our audience did as well, based on all of the interaction. We're now going to take around a 5-minute break before our next session begins. There will be a little graphic on the screen that shows you when the next session starts, but we have a really exciting session coming up next. So grab some water, stretch, or use the time to chat with other attendees in the live chat. The chat will be open throughout the break. So go ahead and network and have some fun, and we'll see you all back here shortly for session 2.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carly.
All right, welcome back, everyone, or welcome if you're just now joining us for TalentTrack. We just wrapped up session 1, which was an awesome deep dive into the state of the industry and what's ahead. It was packed with insights, and if you missed it, don't worry, there will be a recording available later. Now I'm super pumped to kick off our next session, which is titled The Agency's Survival Guide to a Changing Market. We've got a fantastic line of speakers today who collectively bring a wealth of experience in this field. So joining us today are Rich, Miles, Mark, and Brad. They're no strangers to the challenges and opportunities that we all face as an industry, and I can't wait to hear their perspectives. To get us started, I'm going to pick on Rich. Rich is actually an alumni webinar speaker of ours, and we're thrilled to have him back today for TalentTrack, but because of that, I am going to make him introduce himself first. So Rich, can you kick us off with a brief introduction?
I am honored to be here. Thank you so much, Carly. Rich Smith, co-founder and chief marketing officer of Atlas MedStaff. Atlas has been around for approximately 13 years now, predominantly travel nursing and travel allied.
Perfect. Miles, you're next on my screen. Do you want to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. Thanks, Carly. So I'm Miles Bennett, Vice President of Operations at Coast Medical Service. I've been with the company for 8 years now, but Coast has been around since 1979. So we have been here for a long time. I built out our travel division with our president, Kenny, who spoke, I believe, in the last session. And my job, just to sort of put this into context, is pretty simple: make sure the machine runs on time, faster and smoother, and focus on systems and making sure our team is doing what we can.
Great. Thank you, Miles. Brad, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hey everybody. Thanks, Carly, Oliver, and everybody at the Track 5 team for putting this together. I am our recruiting director here at Thrive Staffing. I've been in the contingent staffing world just over a decade now, and like a lot of us, we started out as recruiters. I started out with for a small mom and pop shop out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Shout out Cincy, Ohio, and we grew into a pretty big player. I moved into a training and development role, and like what Kenny and Holly spoke about, the merger and acquisitions, we ended up getting acquired by a big private equity firm. And after a few months and actually a few years, I ended up moving into more of my passion, which was the training and development role, where I worked for Moxie Mentoring for a few years and working with recruiters for some of the largest agencies in the industry. And I had an opportunity to train and coach hundreds, if not thousands, of recruiters, both stateside and offshore recruiters. Many on the call right now, and really through that experience, learned a lot about the industry, and more importantly, what doesn't work in this industry. So I'm super excited to be on this call and be a part of this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. Mark, I know you're going to make a joke about me saving the best for last, but will you finish us off with the intros?
Damn. I was actually going to make a joke about us all getting in trouble before this session started. That was pretty funny. So my name is Mark Zabludovsky. I am Director of Recruitment at Arm Staffing. I've been with this company for 10 years. It's been around for 15. We do travel nursing and allied, and have dabbled in other areas as well. I was actually a travel nurse, CBI senior travel nurse for the agency for about 4 or 5 years. Had a business background, and then I was brought in to help, train and hire and do everything, and be the whisperer and talk to nurses and just do everything that we do. Shout out to Rich and Miles. Rich, I used to look at Atlas Med Staff when I was a travel nurse because, would see out there and your blogs, of course, and, Coastal as well. And shout out to Brad for actually training one of my managers here, with what he was talking about. But that's my story. That's who I am.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for the introductions. We've got a great group here, and I think we're ready to dive right into the questions for this session. We're going to discuss some really pressing topics tailored to help agencies not just survive, but thrive in today's fast-changing market. So first up, we'll start off with a foundational topic. We all know that COVID was a really interesting and truthfully unprecedented time for this industry, and navigating the aftermath of it has been really tricky for a lot of agencies. So I'm curious, what advice would you give agencies still struggling to evolve their processes post-COVID? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I can start, guys. What I would tell you is if you're still trying to get back to normal, you're already behind, right? Too many agencies are trying to recreate how things worked pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, and that's just not the mindset that I would have. Our candidates have changed, their expectations have changed, the industry has really moved forward, and we're running into a little bit of a risk here is what I'm seeing. Some agencies are now leaning too hard onto the automation side, and that just can't alone fix everything. There's a time and place for it, of course, but at the heart of this business, we're still people helping people at the end of the day. So, rather than building out endless of automations, let's start investing a bit more into our people, right? Invest in training your recruiters, teach them how to build real relationships, how to listen, how to lead with empathy, how to deal with the inevitable conflict that our candidates are going to face while they're on contract. Automations can speed up the process for sure, but it can't replace the trust that these candidates have with us agencies. So, You know, if your team isn't equipped to build trust with our candidates, no tool is going to save you in doing that. You know, the agencies that are going to win long term are the ones that are developing great recruiters, great advocates, not just great tech stacks. So really, if you can focus on rebuilding trust and training your people and really delivering that.
I love the sense of you really need to reevaluate what is going on in your tech stack right now. And there's two categories. There's the front office stuff that you use, and there's the back office stuff, right? Back office stuff, that's not going to impact the traveler experience quite as much. You put that into your stack because that's going to impact your internal team and hopefully make their processes simpler. The front office stuff, you need to ask yourself, are you putting this into your tech stack because it's streamlining your internal ops or because it's improving the traveler experience? And if it isn't improving the traveler experience, it probably shouldn't be there. And so I think a lot of folks are throwing stuff out there because it makes it easier for them to talk to additional candidates, or they think it does. And that's really not a good enough reason. It needs to improve the traveler experience.
Yeah,
Rich, you wanna go?
yeah, sure. And mine's easy. There was a question in the comments: define normal. Normal is right now. Like the world that we're living in right now is our normal. And if you maybe challenge yourself to replace, we have to get back to normal. We're not getting back to normal with back to basics. And like Brad had talked about, that it's that one-on-one communication where you can look through your tech stack. You can use AI agents. All these things are available to you, but none of it replaces the one-on-one contact and relationship that recruiter has with that traveler. And it'll make it easier, but in the end, nothing will replace that.
Yeah, I'm gonna touch on flexibility and speed on this one. I think that's a huge thing. I think that things have changed with regard to, you need to build that relationship. Of course, you need to spend time getting to know that person. I was there. But I also need to know that as a traveler going to work at your agency, your recruiter is going to work their butt off to make sure that I'm getting submitted to that position and I'm getting the opportunity to get that job that I really want. And if there are tech stacks or platforms that can help with the speed without sacrificing the relationship, those are the things that you want to be looking for. It's massive. And I think we kind of went outside the scope of this question, but I will mention that recruiters need to know how to, I feel like it's a taboo word, but recruiters need to know how to sell. It's sales what we do. Every conversation that we're having is sales. Everything that you're doing in your personal life, it's sales. Talking to a significant other about what you're going to have for dinner, it's sales, right? So they may not realize it, but they need to read books, educate themselves, learn how to deal with negative situations. And if companies can assist in helping their recruiters get those skills, that's going to go a long way in helping them evolve post-COVID. Because if you came in during COVID, you're just taking orders. It was easy. So if you're a recruiter right now and you didn't have any experience in this industry prior to COVID, you're probably wondering what the hell's going on. So you need to educate. You need to educate your teams. You need to educate yourself and grow in your craft.
Yeah, I love all of that. We talk a lot about the idea of that COVID recruiter and the order taker. So I like that you touched on that, getting back to kind of the basics of recruiting. So that leads into our next question, talking more about the changes in the industry. It's no secret that this industry is always evolving, always changing, and it seems like agencies are tackling new challenges every day when it comes to adapting and embracing these changes head on. So I'm curious how each of you would say the rules of recruiting have evolved in the past few years, and what are the most significant drivers of these changes in healthcare staffing?
Now, I can jump in on this one first. I think first and foremost, we need to understand the travelers and what they want and the math that they have to do. When we were staffing 4 years ago, they were saying, should I leave my home and my family and my kid or my dog and go make 3x what I can make at my staff job? It's a lot easier to say yes to that than it is, should I leave my home and my family to make 10% more? Maybe. It's a different question. And so I think what we're seeing today is there's an uptick in local. There's a lot of folks that want to travel, but they don't want to leave their home state. And so we need to know what clients will accept that type of nurse. They're local, they live close to the hospital. Do you still want them? And those are clients that we tend to lean into. But I would also say that we need to know what they're looking for beyond money. Maybe that person wants to move back to Boston because their mom's getting surgery next month. And if we don't know that and we're just looking at brass tacks, it's hard for us to really help that person. So it starts with, we need to know the math that they're actually doing, and we need to appreciate that. And then second, we need to know why beyond the money they would like to find a new job. And if we can do those two things and we know who they are, I think we have a better chance of actually placing them.
Anyone else want to hop in there?
Yeah, I would just say, I don't think the rules have changed. I think our role has changed, is what I would say. I don't think travelers need just another recruiter or just some order taker. I think, again, like I had said previously, they just need more advocates, right? It's no longer just filling a job anymore. Like Miles said, we're helping people navigate their personal or professional life-changing decisions. And a lot of these clinicians have been through some of the most incredible, difficult experiences over the last few years, my wife included, as a healthcare professional. And they're more aware now, they're more selective now. And honestly, they're more cautious now, and they should be, because, of what they've been through. So being an advocate for these candidates, there are some tech agencies out there that a couple of years ago, they said, we don't have recruiters. And it's like, yeah, you do. You just call them advocates. You just call them something differently. And, and I love that. I thought that was such a good idea. So, it's being an advocate. It really means showing up when you don't have something to sell, right? Or a job to pitch. Here at Thrive, we coach on reciprocity, meaning how can you offer something of value to our candidates without asking for anything in return, right? It's really, that relationship doesn't stop when a candidate gets booked somewhere else. It could be simple as reaching out and asking them how their orientation is going, or how are they feeling about that assignment, or hey, Rich, check out that brewery in Seattle that I've been to before. They've got a great IPA. Or hey, Mark, check out that barbecue joint in Austin. I took my kids there a few years back and we got the turkey tips. Or hey, Miles, check out this hike in Phoenix that I've been on a couple times when you get a weekend off. That's how you build trust. Finding commonalities with them in the shared experiences that you've had, because at the heart of this, that's how you evolve these relationships.
Yeah, that Brad stole my answer right there. I mean, it was the pandemic fundamentally changed healthcare, and in turn fundamentally changed healthcare workers, like across the board. Like, it affected them in ways that I don't think we still fully understand. And it affected us too, as agencies as well. So leading with empathy, understanding what they're doing, why they're doing it, the reasons behind it. Every one of them has a different reason why, and understanding those. As much as I love technology, AI is never going to be able to tell you the real reason why that traveler is doing what they're doing. You're only going to get that from that one-on-one communication and understanding. Just like Brad said, that guy's an IPA fan. He wants to go to these places. That guy's a hiking fan. He wants to go to these places. And it would never be able to give them those. It might eventually, but right now it's not going to be able to give them those recommendations like a real person that understands who they are.
Yeah.
It's never been easier to build a very transactional relationship. There's the chatbots and the AI and the this and the that. So the second you apply to a job, that nurse is getting 20 text messages from everybody. And that's transactional. To your point, it's the people that can actually connect with them, engage with them, remember previous conversations, call upon that the next time. Those are actual relationships. That's who travelers would like to work with, not the person who can get a text message to them right away as soon as they actually apply, and then keep this transactional relationship throughout the entire process. That's not who they want to work with.
Yeah, good that you touched on the platforms, because that's one of the major rises in how things are evolving is the different kinds of platforms, the different companies running those platforms. And everybody here touched on everything that I would say with the transactional versus engagement style of recruiting. I mean, you need to have that speed, like I touched on before, but you've also got to build that relationship while you're working your butt off to get them in there quickly. So I think you guys all covered pretty much everything on this one. I mean, things are changing, but things are the same as well. It's funny. I'll tell you, I popped some of these questions in AI just to get some ideas so I could prep for this thing. And on this one specifically, it talks about what has evolved over the past few years. And here's the 5 things that it came out with. And it's a clinician control has surged, speed and personalization, burnout and mental health awareness, social proof matters more. And I'm sitting there reading these things and I'm like, it's always mattered. That has always mattered. We have always had an issue with the mental health awareness with the nurses. Social proof has always been a thing. Atlas knows that. Speed and personalization always mattered. And then clinician control, maybe that has surged a bit because of these platforms, but they've always had the control. They may not have known it. They may not have had a recruiter that should let them know that. But I think things have evolved, but they haven't changed. They're just going back to what they were before. And again, touching on the things we mentioned before, for the recruiters, like you might just not have been here during that. So it's a shift back with, the speed of the technology and things of that nature. So that's what I got.
Thank you. I love all of those answers, Brad. I especially love that quote. Our rules have not changed, but our roles have changed. I think that ties it all up in a bow. I mean, you have to remember that your candidate is a person. And like you said, you're finding them a job. Moving to a new career is a big deal for anybody, and you're on the other end of that. So, and like Rich said, leading with that empathy is super important. I'm actually going to hop around on our questions a little bit here to our speakers, because I think that this leads into the next question, because we brought up AI and tech. And yes, innovation is awesome, and we have access to so many tech platforms, but sometimes the newest, shiniest strategies aren't the right fit for every agency, and they can actually hinder your practices. It's easy to get caught up in the trends and all of the new tech and lose sight of the practices that have consistently delivered results over time. So my next question for you guys is, how can healthcare staffing agencies balance that need for innovation with sticking to foundational practices that still work?
Don't go all in on every single platform that you see the moment you see it. I think all of us, I would imagine all of us on this session right now are potentially guilty of taking 5 demos at a time. We're literally in the middle of it right now. And we've had to kind of take a step back and say, whoa, which one is going to be the most important, or which 2 are going to be the most important for both helping the nurse, but also helping our recruiter focus on the nurse that needs the most help or can be helped the most. And I think that is where we are with that right now. I'll let somebody else jump in.
I think for us, Rich.
Go ahead, Miles.
No, Rich, it's all you.
Mine's easy. Like, don't be, like Mark said, taking those demos is fine. I'm not scared to take those demos when they come up, but turn your bullshit meter way up on that, right? And really understand not only what they're selling, but how they're selling it. Like, it's just that's easy. There are lots of shiny objects. I was just at Engage in Boston, and there were rows of vendors there. A lot of them are my friends, but then a lot of them too are selling products that just overlap. And they're just some of them aren't necessary right now. Some of them they just aren't. And take those calls, but like I said, turn it up and really understand what you're getting out of that product.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think very similar to what we saw during COVID, there were a lot of cash grab COVID companies that popped up, and they're like, we're in healthcare staffing now. It's like, you're not. You're going to do this for a couple of years. You're going to burn out and you're going to lose, and they're losing now. And in the machine learning tech space right now, we're seeing that as well. All these cash grab, we built a chatbot. It's like, no, you didn't. You just put ChatGPT in a new brand and called it a chatbot. And if one more person tries to pitch me, this is the best new chatbot, my head is going to explode. If I do not take chatbot calls at this point, I'm like, if you are trying to sell me a chatbot, I do not want to hear from you at all. It's just not where our time, I believe, should be focused. Tech should multiply your team, not replace the humanity that your team has.
Yes.
And it needs to enable them to build stronger relationships. It is not meant to replace the relationship building process. And so many of these chatbots are trying to do that, and it's just not going to work for them. My favorite one is the voice ones that they will call the nurse for you. Here's what I say. Somebody told me this 8 years ago when I started. Think about a nurse. They have 12 hours a day they're working, 8 hours a day they're asleep, and you're trying to contact them during the 4 hours in their day that they have to manage and run and enjoy the rest of their life. If an AI bot calls them, how do you think they're going to feel? Like they're valued? Like you know that those are the 4 hours that they get in their day? Or that they're just another number? Probably like a number, right? So to us, the voice stuff, that's a non-starter for us. On the chatbot stuff, I mean, it would need to be really good, and I just haven't seen one yet.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of what Oliver had put in the comments here. He had said a CEO told him platforms breed lazy recruiters. And that's a lot of the demos that I've seen. It was just creating bad habits for these young recruiters coming into the industry. Like, get a notification when your candidate matches to a job. It's like, shouldn't you be talking to your candidates and looking in their system all day? Like, that's my job. And it's just, it just creates a lot of bad habits that I've seen with young recruiters in this industry, even experienced recruiters that I've seen.
I'm going to buck the trend on this one, on that a little bit though, and say, if you've got 50 to 100 candidates sitting in your pending list or in your, whichever terminology you guys use, having something that could potentially show them, it all depends on the ATS or whatever system you've got going as well, right? I mean, so not to completely shit on the stacks that are out there, but if there are ones that can bring the important people, every nurse is important, but you know, guys, what I'm talking about there. If there are platforms out there that can help the recruiters focus on the people that are ready to go, maybe bring those jobs front and center versus having to go into each different profile. If we can cut an hour and a half of time off of a recruiter's desk each day and just put things in front of their face, I think those situations, you will never replace the empathy. You will never replace the engagement. You will never replace the need to train recruiters, the need for them to learn and to hone their skills, but you can help make them more efficient. And I think that's the key there is there's a difference in that.
There's a balance. There's a balance to it.
Balance is the key word.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fun, and this may have nothing to do with anything here, but as you're taking those demos, especially with the voice agents, because there's a ton of them out there right now. See if you can get them to go sideways. If they can't understand the difference between an ICU nurse and an ER nurse, or a lab tech and an X-ray tech, right? If they can't understand that, that's your first red flag. The second red flag is as you're going through that demo and you're talking to that AI agent, see if you can order a pizza, get it off track. And there has been one before. There was one, and I won't name names, but as I was talking to it, I was the nurse, right? I was as if I was filling out that application. I said, well, I want to go to Seattle. Great. What do you like about Seattle? I love pizza. Okay, that's great. I'm like, could you order me a pizza from the best place in Seattle? And it paused for a second and it said, yeah, there's these 3 pizza places. Which one would you like to choose from? And it just instantly went sideways. That's not built for our industry. That's not built for what we want to do. So just be selective and find that balance that works for you.
I don't want to get overly technical here, but I think one of the issues right now with all the chatbots that are out there is their AI is relying on, at best, structured fields. It does not do a very good job in terms of generative AI from a large language model that can read and interpret unstructured fields. So what I mean by that is, if you talk to somebody via text message and they say, hey, I'm not looking right now. My mom's having surgery in 2 months, but reach back out to me in November. Okay, sounds good, right? So for starters, hopefully, we're all acknowledging that this person is a future pending candidate. This is somebody that we don't want the team to text blast a lot. We want to manage that relationship until November, right? So they sort of sit in this future pending list where we're going to want to engage them throughout the next 4 or 5 months and hopefully place them down the road. Great. If you engage chatbots that are out there right now to re-engage with that person. It's going to look and it's going to see they're available in November. They're an ICU nurse. And it's going to reach back out and say, I see you're available in November. Have you thought about starting a contract now? It's like, no, that's terrible. They should reach out and say, how's your mom's surgery?
Yes.
That's the reach out. And so until the chatbot can do that, it's useless.
Yeah, I love that. Somebody wrote in the chat, nurses work with people. They work to help people. So they respond best to people. And I think that that is just something we should always remember. And we don't like to talk to chatbots. Like when I get a phone call and it's an AI, I get so frustrated. So we have to know that the nurses feel the same. But I like what we brought up about balance, because while tech can never replace the human side of the recruiter, it certainly can help with certain tasks. So my next question for you is, how can agencies identify when tech solutions are helping and really working versus when they're hindering their efforts? It's easy to fall into the trap of using tech for the sake of it, like we mentioned, but how do you evaluate if it's actually solving problems for your recruitment teams?
When someone repeats it back to you, when one of your travelers repeats it back to you for something that they maybe wouldn't know otherwise. And I'll give Adam Conrad a lot of credit here. Great Recruiters is a great piece that we have as part of our tech stack right now. We've had multiple calls come in. I saw that recruiter on Great Recruiters. I want to talk to Christy. I want to talk to Adam. Like when they repeat that back to you, something that generally we should know, right? They're utilizing that technology, that piece, and without getting in touch with us first, finding out what they need to know, and then making that first call. That goes to that's a very warm lead when it gets to them right there. So if they're repeating that back to you, you know you found something that works.
I'll shout out staffing referrals. I'll even shout them out when we're not working with them right now. But it is one of the demos that we have been looking at again. We used to work with them, I think 3 or 4 years ago. We took a little time away from them, but it was great because from the nurse's perspective, they had their own dashboard, right? They had a place to go and see anybody that they referred and see how far along they were in that process and see, when am I going to get my placement? When am I going to get my bonus? So, to touch on what Rich said, like something that's working for the candidate, something that is working for the nurse or the allied professional, if they can appreciate it and it helps them out, if it helps them help us, I think that brings high value.
Yeah, love it. We talked a lot about recruiter training, so I'm also going to throw in another question that I didn't send to you guys earlier, but I think that you all are very well versed to speak on it. We know the importance of having strong recruiters, so I'd like to know from your perspective, how can agencies better support their recruitment teams so that they have the skills and tools that they need to successfully recruit candidates and build those relationships?
Number one, and I think this is a little different than the question that you asked, but I think where a lot of teams struggled, especially coming out of COVID, is transparency. What are the numbers we need them to hit and when? And if you can't ask any recruiter on your team what that is and where they stand, and they can't give you an answer, that's a huge problem. Goals. And so it starts with that. And you're going to support them so they can achieve those things and they can reach every benchmark as it comes up. But until there's a very transparent program of where they should be and when, it's very, very difficult to measure anything else that you'll do.
Yeah, tell me how I'm evaluated. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to perform. Right. That's one of my favorite quotes. I think that's where when I talk to recruiters, it's, why did you leave this agency? Well, I didn't know how I was evaluated, or I didn't feel valued. Those are usually the two that I hear the most. And, and then when I'm in training recruiters, it's like, why do I have to make 500 calls a week? Or why do I have to make 200 calls a week? And it's like, well, this is what people before you did, and this is why they were successful in doing it. So you truly have a blueprint to success. So I think Miles is on point, just really pushing, the why behind what you're training and why the rubric to the test, right? I loved that in school because it told me what the questions were going to be and it helped me prepare. So it's the same thing in our roles as recruiters or agencies.
Yeah, just listen to them and eliminate the roadblocks that are in front of them, right? Make it as easy as possible for them to connect with that clinician, the end user in the hospital. Eliminate any of those roadblocks they have in front of them.
if you're training any recruiters, whether you've been doing this a long time or not, training isn't 2 or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. Training is ongoing. It's nonstop. It's mentoring. It's backing them up. It's letting them know that they can come to you and ask you a question anytime they have one, regardless of the face that you might make because you're having a bad day. It's being transparent with them with that and letting them know that this is not a 3, 6, 9 months you're successful. This is a 1, 2, 5 year and then beyond career. And having them understand, and I had this conversation during interviews as well. This is not a job. This is a career. You're not going to get into this. Patrick Bet-David has a video on why 75% of salespeople fail within the first year. If you're going into something as a recruiter to try it out, don't. You know what I mean? It's you've got to be ready to commit to this. And we as leaders and we as trainers and directors and whatever role you want to call it, mentors, leaders, we've got to remember that they are going to need us to back them up, and it's not their fault. They can be at fault for things, but if we don't give them the support that they need, they will fail.
I appreciate those answers. Thank you. We are nearing the end of our set questions for this session, and I'm hoping to have some time to get to some of these questions in the audience, but I have one more question to close with, and it's kind of a forward-looking topic. It's more of a big picture question, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on where we're headed. We heard a little bit from Holly and Kenny in the previous session about where the industry is headed and how agencies can position themselves for long-term success. So what trends do you see shaping the future of healthcare staffing, and how can agencies prepare to stay ahead?
It feels like you can go in 2 different directions here right now. You can go with as much technology as possible and go that way. You can go with as much of the human touch as you want. And I think what's going to win in the end, what is going to come back to the surface is, like we've all talked about here, is that human connection. And that is going to win. I will bet all 21 years of my career in healthcare staffing on that, because I've never seen a tech play, even now, that has shown to be better than the people that are doing it.
I agree with that take. I think you can't ignore the tech that's happening right now and how quickly it's evolving. I think that would be a mistake, right? We need to become a tech-enabled service company. And if we can do that and we can maintain relationships throughout, I think we will win. However, I'll add something we didn't talk about quite as much, which is on the client side, we need to start saying no. I think for a long time, we were taking every job order we could get and throwing it in. That's not the strategy. Just as some of our VMS partners tier us, you should tier them.
Amen.
Where are you converting? Where are you getting feedback? Where are your candidates extending? Where can you milk the most lifetime value? And if those aren't numbers that you're looking at, and you need to know where you can get high lifetime value and conversions and where you can't, and you need to say no to the ones that you can. And taking a hyper-focused approach on the client side with a tech-enabled service on the candidate side, I think will win.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. I like that.
I'll layer onto that. Speed. It's been what we've been talking about this entire session, right? Speed and engagement, right? I mean, that's how you're going to win on it. Being able to build those relationships, staying focused on that while also doing the right job for your candidate to make sure that they get the job they want. Like I said before, like that is so important to them. And then on the flip side, being able to, if that job is closed, which feels like it always is, right? If that job is closed, having the ability to think outside the box and present them other options where this cost was lower than that one, so it winds up being a wash. I mean, I could jump into 1,000 different scenarios there or different situations, but you get my point there. Being able to, I forget who mentioned it earlier, but being able to do math. I mean, who doesn't love some money math? But if you can't have that conversation with them where you break down not just what they're making per week, but what they're making per month or for the entire life of the contract. Somebody asked in one of the questions, I think in the last group, I think it was Letitia. She had mentioned, I even wrote it down. She had mentioned something along the lines of, oh, don't kill me. I'm going to make us pause right now. There it is. So what do you say to the nurses that are going staff for sign-on bonuses because rates are low right now, or they're deciding to go staff instead. So I wonder if recruiters have actually broken down the difference between the staff pay on that assignment versus what their travel pay would be, figuring out what the difference is for every week, multiplying that over the 3 months, right? And seeing what the actual difference is between that staff position and what they can make on the assignment and that bonus coming into play as well. I remember when I first started out, I had nurses saying, well, if I leave my staff position early, I'm gonna have to pay back three months of my bonus. And running the numbers, like sometimes it's just worth it because over a certain period of time, if they'll wait a year before that is done, within 3 months, they could have had that money back and then been free and clear from that moving forward to make that additional money for the rest of the year. So without going down a rabbit hole here, I think it's understanding the numbers and being able to help our candidates understand that as well. So.
Yeah, and I would just add this one thing too, this is still a relationship business. Don't ever forget that. Nurses talk, allied professionals talk, word travels fast. This is a small community as big as it feels. These agencies and recruiters who truly listen, who are advocates for their clinicians, they're going to win. They always will, not just today, but long term.
Yeah, I wrote this down years ago. Was the court of public opinion is swift and it's brutal, and it. Do not get caught on that wrong side, right? Train from the very beginning. This is how we do it, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, guys. We just have a little under 3 minutes left, so unfortunately we don't have time for audience questions, but if you've asked a question in the chat already, don't worry. We will be saving all of those, and then I'm going to send those questions to our speakers after the event, get some written responses from them so that none of your questions will be left unanswered, because I'm sure that this panel has so much more they could share, but I have confined them to 40 minutes, so that's my bad. But thank you again, all of you, for sharing your expertise. This has been a really fun panel. So many good quotes and messages to take from here. We're going to take another 5-minute break before session 3, where we'll be diving into social media recruiting, which is going to be really exciting. So go ahead, grab a coffee, stretch, or like earlier, the chat will be open during the break. So feel free to network and talk. But thank you guys for joining.
Good seeing you guys again.
Thanks so much, Carly.
Guys.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just now tuning in. We just wrapped up session 2 of TalentTrack, which was a super fun panel about how agencies can survive and thrive in today's market. And now I'm pumped to jump into our next session, which is titled From Post to Placements, Tips for Recruiting Success on Social Media. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers joining us: Michaela, Travis, Brianna, and Nick, who are experts in leveraging social media for recruitment. I'm personally so excited to hear their insights and learn more about how we can all level up our social game. So to kick things off, I'll turn it over to our panel for brief introductions so you can get to know them a little bit better.
Hello, everyone. I'll go first. I'm Travis Simnan. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition with Primetime Healthcare. So I've been in the staffing world for just over 7 years now. And throughout those 7 years, I've been had the pleasure of working in recruiting, social media recruiting or lead generation, marketing, and talent acquisition now. So I'm really excited to chat more about social media with Brianna, Nick, and Michaela. So thanks for having me.
Thanks,
I'll
Travis.
go next. My name's Nick. I am a team lead of recruitment over at One Staff Medical. I've been in the industry for about 5 years now. I'm super excited to be here, talk about different strategies that I've used that have led to some great success in the recruiting industry. But yeah, thanks for having me, Carly, and I'm super.
Thanks, Nick.
I'll jump in next. I'm Michaela Bricker. I'm the marketing manager at Arms Staffing. I've been in the industry now for 7 years this month, and I started out as a social media recruiter. I actually used to work with Travis. We were on the same team, and then I transitioned into running my own desk as a recruiter and now marketing manager. So thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Michaela.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Of course, I'm dealing with microphone troubles. But hi, everyone. My
Mhm.
name's Bree. I'm a social media strategist and influencer marketer. I've been in the industry for 5 years, previously at Fusion Medical Staffing. I'm now open to work, which is very exciting. But I'm excited today to be able to share some organic social media strategies, as well as affiliate and influencer marketing, and also learn from my fellow speakers.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for those introductions. It's clear we've got an amazing group here ready to share all the insights about social media. So we'll jump right into it with our first question. To kick things off, I'd like to talk about some of the stumbling blocks that agencies might encounter early on in their social media recruiting efforts. Social media can be a game changer, but it's easy to get a little bit caught up in it all when you're just starting out. So from your perspective, what are the biggest mistakes that agencies make when starting out with social media recruiting, and how can they avoid them?
I can jump in. So I think one of the biggest mistakes agencies make getting started is just going in without a plan and not dedicating time to it. So I think there's not a lot, you have to really practice, understanding how long it takes you to actually make content. Once you get that down, you can really build on that. But going in without dedicating that time to it will really slow you down, and you need that consistency. Expecting those quick wins, is probably unrealistic. So setting good expectations that it's kind of a long game as well with social media. So you have to stick with it, but you have to start somewhere as well.
I agree. I think people think you can post and ghost and that you can post one time and that will bring the leads in, but you really have to be consistent, and that's where you'll see things start to work.
Absolutely. And I would agree
Would
agree with what both of you said. Another thing that I see all the time, just scrolling through different social media sites, is that some agencies are posting too much information. People are on their cell phones, they're scrolling. So you want to keep things simple. You want to make sure, if it's a branded graphic that's grabbing their attention, or it's a location or fun fact about the position, or even pay, which is huge, that something is simple, grabs their attention, and that's what's going to start creating some engagement there.
Yeah, and I'll second just about everyone. So with Michaela and the working backwards aspect, a lot of people post what they think the nurses want to see instead of getting that feedback from the nurses themselves, whether it's listening in conversations, working with your recruitment team, or just doing research on Facebook groups to see what nurses are talking about and those pain points, then filling in your content with where those pain points are. So of course, people want a job, but also, what is that job at a traveler-friendly facility? Making sure to plug that into your social media strategy and working backwards off that. And then I would second with Bree, just the post and pray is what I say. So post and ghost, post and pray, but also cherry picking. And just expecting really quality candidates to come in, and the minute that you see a resume with someone with a year and a half experience and not quite that 2 years of experience, working the long game, like Michaela said, and working to nurture that candidate, find them something maybe a little bit closer to once they gain that 2 years experience, instead of just ghosting and waiting for the people with travel experience and more than 2 years.
Travis, I love the point you made about what better way to cater to your target audience than to ask them directly what they want to see. I think that's great advice. But I want to touch on something that Nick brought up about posting too much information. And I think that leads into our next question, which is a little bit about balance. So as we've all seen, social media isn't just about posting job ads. It's also a platform to build connections, showcase your brand, both your agency and yourself as a recruiter, and engage with candidates over the long term or the long game, like Michaela said. So this brings us to another challenge that a lot of agencies face, which is striking the right balance in their content strategy. So I'm curious, how do all of you balance posting those job listings with creating engaging content to build long-term relationships and trust with candidates?
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's super important to, again, have an overall plan ahead, kind of spacing out, your job postings versus your other engaging content. So just making sure you space it out well. And then like Travis said, taking note about what are travelers talking about right now, what's relevant, and, what are their pain points, and then transitioning that into content.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that's super important is utilizing your brand guide so that when people are scrolling, they see your posts and they all look the same. They all have a uniformed brand that, you know, they know that that's coming from that company. I think another thing that makes it super important is just engaging with candidates, commenting on your post if someone, you know, replies back to you, or even scrolling through, you know, social media at different times, nights and weekends, just like you would your personal social media. Seeing what people are posting, seeing what they're saying, and engaging there will help you start to almost build a reputation for yourself of someone who is actively on those social media sites, helping out, having informative information, you know, but just definitely being active in all areas.
I love that, Nick. Branding is so much more than just the post that you get. It's the experience that you get. So a lot of recruiters I've talked to, they're thinking of the end in mind, which is great. So they want to post as many jobs as possible to then be that recruiter that has a lot of jobs. But then take them down that funnel, talk them through, and make content of what it's like working with you, what makes you stand out, what's your value add as a recruiter. And then once they are able to follow up, or once they do follow up with you, make sure that you are following up in time and showing that good experience. Because for sure, one of the pain points is ghosting, reaching out to a recruiter about a job, and then you don't hear anything back on Facebook Messenger or just through other social media avenues.
Something that we've even heard a lot today in the other sessions is the human element of this industry that we're in. People want to work with people. So even if it's the social media strategy for the agency or if it's for recruiters, I always encourage showing who you are and showing your personality. For agencies, that can include influencers and pinging people who have similar ideals as your agency and working with them, sharing traveler photos like, hey, look at my traveler on assignment in Seattle. They're having such a great time. Or even showing what you as a recruiter, what your day-to-day looks like. There's so many ways to add that in. And I think that's important in sales, is not just, hey, I have this job, come work for me. It's, hey, I'm a person, I'm a human. Here's what I'm all about.
Yeah, Brianna, you teed me up perfectly for our next question, so thank you. But you're right. At the end of the day, people want to work with people. And on top of that, they want to work with people that they can genuinely trust. And a huge part of building that trust is being authentic. Authenticity on social media stands out. You can tell when someone's being real, and you definitely can tell when they're not. So in your experience, what role does authenticity play in building trust with candidates on social? And how can agencies or recruiters ensure that their content feels genuine to who they are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think authenticity is number one. I would say there's a lot of different people and agencies and different, you know, recruiters posting different information. And I tell everyone, check your sources. You know, if you're finding something from social media, always look at the email address that's attached, or go to the company website, you know, and cross post. So I think, you know, authenticity and consistency, posting jobs and different positions with information that matches your website. So if they go and they want to do their due diligence and do some research, they're, you know, seeing the same information posted. There's nothing worse than you post a job with this pay package, this shift, and they're interested. They go to do their, you know, diving in on the position and everything, and the information doesn't match. It makes the recruiter lose credibility, in my opinion, you know, and so you always want to make sure that things are all cohesive, you know, across to all of your different, you know, postings and different websites, you know.
Great, thanks, Nick. Anyone else want to add on to that question?
I think authenticity goes hand in hand with transparency, which is what all nurses want in this industry. And so I think if you can have both of those, you are on a good path.
And trust there's not a specific timeline on it. It's more than just applying for a job, and then even if you respond to their response, still there's trust issues. You're going to have to go through that first phone call. You're going to have to go through some adversity together. You're going to have to go through multiple phone calls with each other for that trust to be built. But for me, like, clear is kind. So setting a standard for all of your travelers that you talk with, or all of the people that you talk with, and making sure to follow through with that expectation, whether it is in terms of follow-up, how you prepare for phone calls, what you know about the market, and doing due diligence when you're looking for jobs for them. So clear is kind, and it's a good expectation to have.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point that your content definitely needs to feel genuine. Like I feel like nurses and really anyone, you can spot out a stock photo a mile away. So just sharing real like nurses, traveler photos on assignment. If your travelers come into the office, taking pictures with your nurses. There's so many ways you can make really genuine content, and it is very clear to see what's genuine versus like maybe what's stock. So especially in the world of AI and all these things coming out, it's clear to spot right now. That might change in the future, but I think if you have that focus on genuine relationships and highlighting that, I think you'll really stand out.
I'm sure all four of us have used the same Canva background at one point with the same background.
Yep. I agree. And going along with that, like the AI caption is so easy to spot on social. Which kind of leads me into my next question, shifting gears a little bit here. I want to get personal with each of you. You all are great with social media. That's why I asked you to be on this panel talking about social media, but even the best of the best have a list of their awesome successes and a list of their not so awesome failures. So can each of you share an example of a social media campaign or strategy that significantly boosted your recruitment efforts, or one that you're particularly proud of for whatever reason? Or if you're feeling extra brave today, maybe share one that flopped.
Well, I think one thing that's super important, I always focus on our direct contracts. It's relationship building in all aspects. Posting jobs, no one wants to see a job that they're interested in, and they do all the work to get their application built, their profile built. You go to submittal, and it's 2-3 weeks down the road, and it's filled, or you never get any feedback. So just having a general knowledge of what jobs you are posting, you can throw in those little tidbits in your post as well. This manager is actively looking to interview. They want to bring someone on. Just having that information, or having knowledge of the relationships that us as a company have built with some of those direct contracts. You have a little bit of insight, that we have a relationship with that facility. So it gives us a little bit of a head up on some of the other ones where you're passing through a middleman, passing through the third-party companies before you actually get to the facility. So having that knowledge of where they're going and a little insight of what they're getting into on that assignment, I think is definitely where my strategy has always been very successful, and just having a good understanding of the job that I am posting for.
Love it. Thanks, Nick.
I don't have a super specific example here, but I would say just like my overall strategy is just to be consistent and engaging online. And what I found was the more I was posting, the more I was engaging with people with communications online. Once they started reaching out to me, I was like, okay, this is working. Like at the end of the day, you want people to come to you versus you having to be the one to reach out. So I would say overall, keeping that engagement out there, getting your name out there, showing yourself as an industry expert, people will naturally come to you. So I think just that consistency overall will help you succeed.
Agreed.
I think early go ahead, Bree.
Go ahead. You got it.
Well, hopefully this tees you up a little, just more on the marketing side. I mean, something that I've learned is, again, back to the end goal in mind. I always thought the giveaways, I'm like, all right, we're going to get hundreds and hundreds of nurses applying for this. And we may have, but the quality of the lead, it never converted to be able to do that. And then two, people were more annoyed that we were calling to try to talk about travel assignments when they just wanted a free Yeti bag or just a free speaker, little things like that. So making sure to have a method to your madness of working with your marketing department of, actually, I would love to grow our vanity metrics. I would love to grow our Facebook followers and what Michaela was alluding to, just our overall reach of our brand, and have that be the main goal, because then it can lead into quality lead flow and just quality placements for the recruiter. So making sure to split those up and working with your marketing teams was extremely beneficial for me.
That actually did tee me up, Travis. Thank you so much. A lot of the things that I've seen be successful on social media is those types of things that even if it doesn't right at that moment bring in that qualified lead, you're still getting engagement, you're still getting your brand out there, you're still getting followers. I think it goes back to trust. And what do you look at sometimes when you're looking at a new brand you maybe want to buy? You look at how many followers they have. You see how much of a following they have. And I think that goes hand in hand. Like, I don't want to say there's never been any campaign that hasn't been successful. There's definitely been that, but I always try and find the positive, like, oh, okay, maybe we didn't get as many qualified leads, but we brought in this many followers, we got this many engagements, and it all goes hand in hand to bring back those leads. They might remember you, remember your agency, remember your name. So it can still lead to something positive.
Yeah, I love that, Brianna. I think that brand awareness piece can be overlooked a lot, but it's so important. And you guys teed me up perfectly for my next question. So we are just working very well off of each other, but I want to talk about metrics. We are lucky, but also a little bit tortured to live in a time where we have data on literally everything. It's a blessing and a curse sometimes. We did a recent webinar last year about branding and travel healthcare. And one of our speakers called it the analysis paralysis. You make one social post and all of a sudden there's impressions, there's clicks, there's likes, there's all the things to look at. And it can be really overwhelming to figure out where to start and what truly matters. So how do you measure the success of your social media recruiting efforts, and what metrics matter most to you? Any takers?
Well, I'll go. I mean, on my side, I'm in the recruitment sales side of things. So, we have our marketing team. They're working on building that brand. They post to our, social media accounts. On my side of things, I'm looking for those built profiles with candidates, those candidates who are actively looking, building my pipeline of people who are, wanting to travel, and at the end of the day, who I can get placed and who I can get working. That's going to be, ultimately the goal of all of my social media posts. Now, with some of those things, even if it doesn't lead to a placement or they're actively working for our company, getting their information, working with them, starting to build that relationship with them and getting them into our system. Our system has campaigns that it runs on the back end of things that help with engagement, that sends different text blasts. So even if it's not leading to, say, that exact job post that I initially got that candidate from, they're still engaging. We're still engaging with them as a company, that something else might trigger them. And then, they ultimately work with us at the end of the day.
Thanks, Nick.
I love that. And I'll say conversions, and just making conversions is what it comes down to. And speaking sales for Nick, just being or having the pleasure of working in recruitment and marketing, we can say all day long, oh, we got so many impressions. But then the sales mind is going to be like, all right, did we get any candidates for that? And you need to learn to talk both. And I know there's some salespeople on here and some marketing people on here, but making sure your data is accurate too, just so you can continue to bring that down the line. So if your goal is to recruit off certain Facebook groups, whether it's using a UTM code, I'm sure Bree can expand more on that, but making sure that the traffic you bring from Facebook, whether it's to a website or to the applications for a job, you're going to be able to work backwards off that. That way, wherever you're finding your most qualified candidates, let's say it is 2 to 3 groups after you're finding through the data that comes to applications and through quality candidates, that will allow you to spend more time in those groups. You're never going to bat 1,000. But where can we spend more time? Where can we be that safety net and more consistent safety net to get quality candidates down the line? So accurate data, I would say, is very important, and definitely work with marketing teams on that aspect.
Yeah, and recruiters do so much already. I give them so much credit. And to ask them to do more things in the social media realm is huge. But when you are in those Facebook groups, try different types of job postings. Try it with an image, try it with a GIF, try it with emojis, like try those different things. And then that's where that data comes in. Go back and see what worked, see what got the most likes, see what got the most comments, and then start to adjust your strategy when you're posting jobs based on what you've seen that's worked. So the answer is kind of look at everything. But really that's going to help you give you an overall picture of what these nurses want to see, what healthcare travelers want, and what gets their attention.
Awesome. Thanks, Brianna. Just like there's so many metrics available that it can be overwhelming, it can also be difficult to juggle all the different platforms that we have at our fingertips. It feels like there's always a new platform or segment of a platform to focus on. So I'd like to know from each of you, how do you adapt your strategies for different platforms if you do? And which ones have been most effective for you in recruiting nurses or other travel healthcare professionals?
Yeah, I think each platform has kind of a different strategy, and they've kind of built themselves in a way of certain candidates going to certain places. You know, for an example, a lot of Facebook, there's a lot of people who are newer travelers who are seeking information. You know, they're more scrolling and kind of browsing to see if something, you know, jumps out to them. Whereas LinkedIn, you have a lot more people who are directly there looking for specific information, trying to connect with a recruiter or someone within a company. So I think they all kind of have formulated their own kind of source, you know, where, you know, you are looking for what information you're trying to get out of it. And I think they've kind of established their own boundaries on that.
Yeah, to kind of build on that, like LinkedIn, for example, there's so much like information out there. I feel like it's more of an informational platform, when Facebook is more like conversational, people going back and forth, discussing what's happening in their day-to-day, working with their recruiters. You know, there's just so many more conversations. So it is a little bit of a different feel. I would say overall, though, you know, as a recruiter, I definitely had the most success and the most quick wins from Facebook. It's just so much more engagement. Everyone's on there 24/7, personally and professionally. So that was definitely the best resource for me as a recruiter.
I agree. I'm always surprised at how much Facebook still is just like the top one. Like you would think, oh, no, Instagram or TikTok. And it's like, no, Facebook is still the tried and true. Getting in those Facebook groups where all of those healthcare workers are and talking directly to them. It still blows my mind that it's still the top dog, honestly.
I agree. Clinicians go to Facebook because, one, most of the content on Facebook, it's unfiltered. They say before they think, and I know clinicians go there to Facebook groups to see that unfiltered because they want to know the true, transparent view of what they're going to be expecting during travel. And I feel like Facebook gives that truly. And then keeping it as simple as possible. Going internally, why do you go on Instagram? Why do you go on LinkedIn? Why do you go on Facebook? And working backwards off that. Instagram, TikTok, it's going to be more lighthearted lifestyle type of content. LinkedIn, it's going to be a little bit more professional than Facebook, kind of that mix between Instagram and LinkedIn, but the unfiltered approach too. So guiding of why you go to those social media accounts and then making content in that realm always helps.
Yeah, I love that, Travis. And we talked a little bit in the last panel about how it's easy to forget that the candidates are people just like us. So the same reasons that they choose certain platforms over others, like you said, is the same reason we do. So I think that's really helpful to remember. I have another question that wasn't on your preset list of questions. Sorry, guys, but I am curious about this. There's always new trends and changes to keep up with in social media. So I'm wondering, how do you stay up to date with those to keep your recruiting strategies relevant, but also knowing which trends to kind of pick and choose so that you're not just being trendy and not really staying true to your brand?
I think it's spending time scrolling, spending time seeing what other people are sharing, what piques your interest when you're scrolling, what makes you stop. And then thinking, it's like my brain doesn't shut off now on how can I take that and make it work for the brand or make it work for myself. So again, recruiters, I give you guys so much credit. You're doing so much already, but even taking 10 minutes of your time to scroll and then think, how can I make this content relevant for myself? That's something I always highly encourage.
Absolutely. And just kind of piggyback off of that, it's just constantly scrolling and being aware. You'll see other posts and people talk about, oh, I'm looking to go to this location. And for whatever reason, I've noticed this over the last couple of years, you see people gravitate towards different places for whatever reason. You know, like one month it could be that they're super interested in Wisconsin. The next month, for whatever reason, they're interested in South Dakota. That there's constantly trends, especially playing off location wise, that it's just paying attention and still engaging with all of them and chatting with them and trying to find those connections, with also having your personality there where they want to gravitate towards you, but also as collectively as a group, they're all kind of trending in these different ways. So I think it's just paying attention to what's going on. And like Brianna said, just applying it to your brand as well.
And trends are so fast. So you could hop on a trend, you could see it, you need to make it that day and it could be gone the next.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's just so important to constantly see what's out there. So you're constantly changing, and just, it's okay to try new things with social media. Like, not every post is going to be a hit. It's okay to try out new things. It's just important to review your analytics, see what worked and see what didn't, and make adjustments from there. You're never going to learn or never going to know unless you try. So.
And I like mimicking other brands that nurses like. So not being afraid to do your own research or ask a nurse if you're close to them, or a traveling healthcare clinician, of what do you like to do in your off time. So a lot of things I hear, Starbucks, Target, and looking at those brands to see what they're doing to hopefully spark some creativity of what we can be doing, since it's hitting that same target market has turned out to be successful for us.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. I have one last preset question before we turn to some audience questions, and I'm excited to hear your answer on this one. I'm sure it's probably going to line up with a lot of what we've already discussed, but for all of the agencies that haven't really nailed down social media recruiting yet, what are some practical steps or encouragement you'd share to get started? Or in other words, what is one piece of advice you would give to agencies that are still stuck in that trial and error phase of social media recruiting?
I think realizing that it's not going anywhere. This is the future. This is kind of what you have to do. And as a recruiter, you have to wear many hats. And one of them is sometimes a social media strategist. And so I think that that's really important, is just to know that, like, everyone's on social media. You're going to go to a new restaurant this weekend. You're going to go look at their social media. You want to possibly work with a healthcare recruiter. You're going to go look at their social media. So just understanding that this isn't going away. And if you're wanting to start, just do it. Just start. You can always figure it out later, but just start posting those jobs and getting a feel for it. And it just takes practice and takes time. So
I would say for recruiters, lean on your marketing team, lean on your recruiters. Back to that transparency, recruiter, I would second with Bree what she's been saying this entire time, is recruiters already do so much, but also utilize that knowledge that they have, because they're the ones in the trenches talking to these healthcare professionals. So ask them for ideas, but also find out what are some pain points. That way you can use content for to plug in those pain points to something that is fitting your brand. So definitely lean on each other for ideas and for strategies.
Yeah, like Bree said, you just have to start somewhere, and you really just have to put yourself out there, get a schedule set up, create a content calendar. You just have to dedicate the time to get things rolling, and then it will just come natural after that. But you really just need to understand your audience, know who you want to target, and really just create a focus. But to recruiters as well, I mean, it's just a great way to build your pipeline. If you're not already on social media recruiting, there's no reason not to try it out. There's so many job boards, there's so much noise out there, but you're not going to, gain anything if you don't try. So you have to start somewhere, and today's a good day to do that.
Yeah, just like everyone else said, start somewhere. Try things that work, things that don't work, find what's going to work for you. I think working directly with your marketing team is super important. If you're going to have multiple recruiters posting on all of these different platforms, having that cohesive brand, I think, is so important, where someone scrolls and they know exactly what company that is, what that company represents. With not only internally, with your marketing team, but also with going out on social media, but ultimately just having it all cohesive when you're posting.
Great. Thank you, guys. We have some time for audience questions. So we already have some in the chat. We'll turn over to those. Carrie asked, I'm a senior recruiter at a small startup without the name recognition I had at my old agency. How do I get above the noise? It doesn't seem to matter how fancy my Canva graphics are, not getting much in the way of comments or interest, and I'm coming up empty on trying to find a way to be unique or stand out. Any advice for Carrie?
My advice would be trying video content. If you're not seeing a lot of stuff with your graphics or stagnant content, even if it's a 15-second video, you slap some copy on it, like, that is also just where things are going. Even Instagram has seen what TikTok has done, and they are pushing more video content up on feeds. So that's a great way. If you have budget, influencer marketing, that will really help you get your name out there. So those are two easy ways to kind of start if you're just having some trouble with just graphics and stagnant images.
Awesome. Thanks, Bree. We'll be talking about influencer marketing on a later panel, so thank you for that little plug. I like this next question too. Jenny asked, question, are hashtags still relevant? Asking for a Gen X friend.
I think it depends what platform you're on. LinkedIn, you will find, I think it will help your posts. Instagram, it's still something that's kind of up in the air. TikTok, it also definitely helps. It's something that you kind of just have to keep your eye on. It's also ever changing. Try posts with them, try posts without them. Try working it into your posts copy and see if that helps. But yeah, kind of trial and error there.
And specifically for Facebook groups too, especially if it's a private group, the hashtag's not going to get out of there since there's private setting. I've done that myself. So making sure you don't do hashtags within private groups. But yeah, Bree was spot on with what she said with hashtags.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Our next question is from Nicole. This is a little more market focused. She said, I find with allied healthcare groups that they are not as responsive compared to the RN groups. What ideas, strategies, or experience do you have around this?
I would say, you know, it's tough out there for sure. I've heard the same thing. I personally was always specialized on the nursing side, but I would say with allied, you know, just as nursing, you want to be consistent and put your name out there. Even if you're not getting responses, people are still seeing your graphics, and maybe they're just like waiting for the right location. Maybe consider posting like a poll or more of like a generic post, not even a job post. Like, hey, who's looking for a job? Comment below or reach out to me. Just trying to come up with different ideas that aren't just job heavy, that, you know, might spark more engagement, or, you know, kind of a Q&A type of thing. Like there's so many different ways you can post outside of jobs to spark more conversation. Yeah, that'd be my suggestion.
Traveling in allied is not definitely not as known as travel nursing too. Even during the boom of COVID, it was mainly RRTs on the allied sector that really boomed, but everyone else stayed pretty consistent. So you're having a lot of those first conversations about what is travel and what to expect compared to travel nursing. You can mostly likely find it on Google or social media too. So yeah, I mean, yeah, for allied specifically, whenever you do connect with like a clinician, or whenever you're able to place them, or you have a great qualifying conversation, don't be afraid to plug in your social media, your Facebook groups or your Facebook profile, your LinkedIn profile, whatever you use for recruiting. It helps put a face to a voice, but also it allows a point of contact going forward, just in case you miss out on that candidate too. And you can, it is a longer game type of model, but you can grow your pipeline, you can grow your community through your friends on Facebook, through your connections on LinkedIn, little things like that. So I've worked on growing that.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. And this goes back to what Travis was talking about how recruiting and marketing need to work together. So David asked, how would you suggest that the marketing team tactfully convey that recruiters be more active in sourcing, particularly on social media?
That is a good question. I think being able to show the success that some recruiters have had with this, because I think a lot of recruiters are maybe scared, or they're like, I'm not even active on my personal social media. Why would I do this? And it's like, it's just another way. It's just another way to help you build your desk, get your name out there. So I think you kind of have to show that, hey, here's some examples of how this has worked. This post led directly to a placement. I was able to do that with some recruiting training that I did. And I think it helped to start off with like, hey, this isn't just another thing on your desk that you have to do. This can be helpful and can lead directly to placements.
And the other end, the consistency of it all, you learn so much about the industry just being on social media and that sector of travel healthcare too. You find out the pain points, you find out what people are thinking, you find out what they like doing outside of work, and just what they've experienced over the past few years with COVID and post-COVID. So at least it shows success in terms of getting leads and getting a good lead funnel into the recruiters, but for your individual knowledge, for both the marketing team on knowing who to support and the recruiters learning more about the industry, I would say that is definitely a big plus too.
Absolutely. And another thing with it is, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It takes time. It takes consistency. It takes build up. It's building that reputation. But also there are certain instances, because I am still recruiting. I still run a desk. And so I'm utilizing all these different sources. I'm still cold calling, all of it. Sometimes working through social media, it is a tool that can help in the background. While you're making those cold calls, things like that, you have a post that's out there. Maybe 2 days later or later that night, it starts to get some engagement and it blows up. And so then, you follow up with that, but it can also work in the background while you're still focusing all those other tasks that you have to do.
Awesome. We are just about out of time, so we're going to wrap it up here. I want to say thank you again to Michaela, Travis, Brianna, and Nick for such an engaging and informative session. I know that I walked away with some practical tips to elevate our social media strategies, and I'm excited to hopefully see some new and exciting social posts on my feed after this from everyone in the audience. We also did want to take a little bit of time here to shout out Brianna. As Brianna mentioned, she is open to work and clearly she knows her stuff. So if anyone out there in the audience is looking for someone to fill a social media role at your agency, we really encourage you to get in touch with her. She would make a great addition to anyone's team. So with that, we are going to take another brief 5-minute break and we'll see you back here shortly for session 4.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome if you're just now tuning in, or welcome back if you've been with us for a while. We just wrapped up session 3 of TalentTrack, which was such a great conversation all about social media recruiting. A huge thank you again to Michaela, Travis, Brianna, and Nick for sharing their expertise. Now I'm super pumped to get into our next session, which is titled Job Board Confessional, What We Wish Our Clients Knew. Ooh, it's a little dramatic. For this session, we are joined by Oliver and Yusuf, and I have to say, I am honored to be sharing this screen with the two of you. It really feels like I'm a part of the Placement Playbook podcast.
Hey, there you go. Anytime, Carly.
Yes, thanks. For those of you in the audience who don't know, Oliver and Yusuf are actually business competitors, but they've built such a great collaborative relationship, so much so that they started a podcast together called The Placement Playbook. You can definitely check out those clips on LinkedIn, but it's exciting. It feels like we're at a live podcast recording and I'm like the weird fan who jumps on the stage, but I'm excited to turn it over to Oliver and Yusuf so they can quickly introduce themselves before we jump into these questions.
Cool. Yusuf, you go first, man.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Yusuf. So I'm the founder of Vetted. So we came onto the space probably 5 years ago or so. I've been in the industry maybe 10 years. So we're a marketplace. We compete friendly with Oliver and his team. But we basically work with a bunch of different healthcare staffing companies to send them nurses that exist in our marketplace.
And you guys know us, TravelNurseSource, AlliedTravelCareers, LocumJobsOnline, a couple other verticals as well. So happy to be here. And yeah, happy to wrap it up with Yusuf over here at Vetted. This is gonna be some good shopping, so it's gonna be good. Chop it up.
Thanks, guys, for those introductions. I'm really excited for this session. Both of you have a wealth of shared experience in this industry, and I think it's important for agencies and job boards to kind of learn from each other. We both see different sides of the industry, but when we come together, there's a lot we can share and take away from one another. So that leads into our first question, which is, what's one surprising thing you've each learned about staffing agencies over the past year?
I can maybe start. I think the most surprising thing that I actually saw at NATHO this last year was there's a lot of roll-ups and mergers. So I think a lot of staffing companies are noticing that they don't have as much leverage individually as they could as a unit with other staffing companies. So even recently we saw that with TotalMed and Travel Nurse Across America, them merging to create more leverage in the industry that basically just boosts their job supply, They can unify their ATSs, they can unify their clinician database, and then they can also combine the best tactics that have worked for each agency. You also see this with smaller staffing companies doing roll-ups and merging together to form a larger entity. So you might notice a small staffing company that has $15 to $20 million per year in revenue. And what they'll do is they'll roll up with 5 or 6 other staffing companies to create that leverage so they get more job supply from the VMSs and MSPs, because then they're considered a medium-sized player. So a lot of these staffing companies that are smaller, that are maybe not getting access to large job supply, not feeling like they have the leverage to negotiate with VMSs and MSPs, they'll combine so that they do have the leverage and can operate at a larger scale.
Yeah, I would say also the business development side of that, right? Like a lot of these agencies are banding together for their access to single serving contracts and kind of putting them together. And I'm doing kind of more with less as well, but that is true. I would say, so in the last year or so, we've been really diving into data with our clients and really extrapolating data from them on, with their permission and rolling it through our platform and merging everything together. And it's given us a really interesting perspective on how our clients are, kind of judge, us or their marketing tools and services. And I think the overarching headline that we've came away with is that, and this is no surprise to agencies, is that their data is very much, not correct, right? It's not. And they all are partly convinced that it is, or as good as it's going to be, but the other half knows it's not correct. But as we've been washing this data through, we're looking at, this data that's not accurate, and it really plays to a strategic conversation about how their agency utilizes, inbound leads or candidate leads, or how they recruit. The data tells a story. And if that story is based on incorrect data, the strategic conversation, decisions that the agencies are making is different as well. And we've seen dramatically different needs from doing this data. So it was really eye-opening. And sometimes it's not even wrong, like we've made this mistake and we're misattributing. That is part of it. But some of it is just there's so many things hitting the HR tech stack, which are changing data. There's so many layers in the HR tech stack. You think of things like Staffing Edge and Sense, all these different analytics modules, like everything is coming in and touching this data. And it's just the data hygiene component is just a really big issue right now. And I think it's only going to get worse.
Awesome. Thank you both. As job board owners, you guys get to interact with all kinds of agencies, from the big players to the underdogs and everything in between. And with that perspective, you get the chance to see a wide range of what works and what doesn't. So in your opinion, and from what you've seen, what will the smartest agencies be doing 12 months from now that others won't?
I think touching on what Oliver was saying, so the smartest agencies that we see, they're centralizing their data to get more intent data inside of their ATS. They're getting cleaner on their attribution model to know what is the true source of placements. And they're fine-tuning automations using SMS and emails to make sure that candidates are getting contacted promptly whenever somebody applies to a job. Even things like scoring candidates so that the highest urgency, highest intent candidates are being pushed through the process faster. So knowing which jobs are likeliest to convert, allocating resources efficiently so that recruiter time is spent on the right candidates, the ones that are most likely to convert, because recruiter time is a real asset. So where you're allocating that attention and that resource is super important. So if a lot of recruiters are contacting leads that are maybe CNAs, low margin positions, or unlikely to place positions, that's just a waste of recruiter time. And what we've seen is staffing companies are getting leaner. So that means recruiter time is becoming more scarce. So recruiters need to spend time on the kind of most likely to convert candidates and the most likely to convert job supply as well.
Yeah, and I would kind of build off that a little bit, and I think some of the biggest opportunity across the board here is this realignment of perception of time frame and kind of recruiter styles. So like where I'm going with this is, a lot of the conversations we're having with the C-suite down is kind of realigning, how they look at the time needed to place, for example, or how many touch points go into that placement, or when they can expect that the role of nurturing to go into this lead. For example, well, we're expecting candidates to place within X amount of time, and now there's that conversation about taking a little bit longer. And while it's taking a little bit longer, there's that nurturing process that goes in. So the go-to is like, let's blast them with sense, let's email them. And the conversation, really, everyone's doing that right now. I mean, the nurses and candidates are getting inundated with automation, like on an hourly basis. Like everyone is just handing it to automation, which is fine. That's what it's there for. But what we're seeing, what some of these agencies are telling us, is some of the clinicians are responding better to the agencies that are actually reaching out manually, right? Because now, reaching out manually is cutting above the generic, one-liners that are coming out of Sense or email marketing, or heaven forbid, agencies are using like voice drops and like automate, AI voice agents. Like now, just having a normal human experience is the outlier. Who would have thought? But I would say that's the other part. And again, we're all coming off this really, high, COVID with, we'll be honest, a dominant platform which gamified everything through text messaging, and I think recruiters are having a hard time getting back on the phones, and having to put in that amount of work. So we're seeing a lot of the agencies, restructuring their recruiting requirements, their teams, rehiring, retraining, because the mission is completely different than it was. We all know that, but we haven't all quite right-sized yet. And we're on calls every day with agencies that are still feeling that problem. And it's really costing them dearly. I'm assuming, Yusuf, you hear the same thing.
Yeah, we're hearing the same exact thing. I think there's been a very high turnover in recruiters, partly because the training that was done for recruiters during COVID is very different from the training done today. So rates have dropped drastically. So it's much more difficult to sell candidates today than it was previously. There's the recruiting cohort of people that existed pre-COVID that still know what the expectations in the market is. And it's also similar for nurses. So nurses that entered pre-COVID also understand expectations of this market and what it means to be a travel nurse. I think the recruiters, but also the nurses that entered the market during COVID have very drastic expectations of the market. So now things are kind of leveling down to what it used to be before the pandemic.
Yeah, and I would also say, I see it as something on the chat about cold calling, right? Like the art of outreach, and I'm not talking sense, I'm talking the art of outreach. I mean, my older like directors of recruiting and agency owners, and even like salty dog recruiters that have been doing this for a very long period of time, you will all remember this, but like the art of getting on the phone and like cold calling or, recruiting somebody over the phone is now a skill. Like it's a skill. And, rebuttal handling, right? Being able to take an objection, being able to get past the gatekeeper. I mean, I think it was Mark from, was it Mark that was talking about it, recruiting being a sales function, right? It really is. So just like sales, you have a gatekeeper, you have a series of objections you have to handle, you have to close, right? And I don't know if we're necessarily as an industry equipping our recruiters in that capacity. I think we're equipping our recruiters more as marketing agents than we are sales agents. And I think that has to strategically change, really do.
But I'm also seeing that training functions within staffing companies are getting a lot stronger and gaining a lot more respect.
Yeah.
So making sure that you're training recruiters to be salespeople versus just moving papers around, getting submission packet and trying to submit a candidate. So legitimately being salespeople.
And you have to. And not only that, but let's just take post sale. Like, you get a submission and everything's working, and you're in that lull period, while they're ready to show up, right? Like you have to walk these candidates like kindergarten to the first day of class, because the abandonment rate, the no-show rates are high. What, 15 to 20% in general for the industry right now? We learned it as a NATHO. I think that's right, Yusuf. Like the amount of personal contact and effort is required to get these candidates to show up and stay, let alone re-enlisting. And there's no way you can automate this, and there's no way you can text message and messages through. This is a much bigger and larger game than we really give it credit for. And I know everybody on this webinar would probably agree. I mean, someone's got to say it. It's hard.
Yeah, speaking to that cold calling and recruiter training piece, a little shameless plug here. Oliver and I filmed a little bit of a parody video, but not so parody, about cold calls that we've heard from TravelNurseSource. So I think, speaking to Charlene's point, nurses don't like cold calls because they've heard so many bad ones. And preparing your recruiters to stick to that human element and get to know the candidate rather than just getting right into the job is so important.
And sometimes just the authenticity. Nora, who's on the chat, you guys can see her back and forth. She heads up for business development. And Nora's cold call opener, her favorite cold call opener right now in her sales prospect that she's calling agencies, some of you are on the chat, her first like sentence is, "Hi, this is Nora. You're going to hate me. This is a cold call." She puts it out there, right? Like if that authenticity of like, "Hey, this is a cold call, but I'm here to talk about something that we may have that you may like. Do you have 37.5 seconds for me?" Right? So I think just leading with authenticity and leading with that skill it would be the game changer for agencies right now in this environment.
Awesome. We're going to move on to a little bit of a fun question that raises the stakes a little and gives you a little more control. So if you could force every staffing firm to do one thing tomorrow, what would it be?
I think it's just kind of following up with leads, making sure that you're calling leads using multiple touch points. Time to contact is super important. So getting in touch with the lead as quickly as possible. I do think you do have to prioritize lead flow because not every lead is kind of built to equal. So if you have 100 leads that are coming into your agency every hour, you do have to prioritize to some extent to make sure that your recruiters are focused on the highest intent leads, the ones that are most likely to convert. But even then, it doesn't mean that you just disqualify leads that are coming top of funnel. You do have to call every lead. You have to follow up with every lead, and you have to do it timely because the market right now is super competitive. That means agencies are getting in touch with candidates within minutes, which means if you're not doing the same, then you oftentimes will lose out on that lead. Same for time to submit. So the agency that's able to get the submission documents as quickly as possible from a candidate is likely the one that's going to win the placement. So I think the big one is calling leads, making sure that you're actually a salesperson. You're following up multiple touch points, not just calling the lead once, leaving a voicemail and giving up there. If it's a high intent, high quality lead and a good candidate that you think you can place, I think it's doing multiple touch points with that candidate so that you can beat out the competition.
I would agree. I mean, flawless execution is what we ideally want from all of us, right? I would say on top of just what Yusuf said about calling quickly, using best practice, putting in some sort of a realistic nurture, phase. I would say another thing is that if my wish for our partners and future partners and past partners, if I could change it tomorrow, would be to answer the damn phone. So, and I'll show you why, right? So Yusuf, you and I have had this on the podcast, right? Even just from the candidate perspective, we have like 80% of candidates that call our agencies are not answered. They're not answered during business hours, or they're on an 8-minute hold time, or they have to be transferred 4 times to somebody's voicemail. And this is just your inbound. So if that's how you treat your inbound, how are you treating your outbound? So that's one. Two, we work with over 150, 180 agencies, right? We've been doing this for 17 years now. Hopefully another 17. We know kind of what works. We also have had decent success in making the majority of our clients, not all of them, but do well, right? So we call every month to try and get agencies to get aligned so we can help them perform better. And sometimes it's not even tactical. It's like, hey, we hear this is working. Have you tried this? Or hey, this modality is really popping off. Have you dedicated time to this? And it's a struggle just to get agencies to answer the phone because they're busy. They're at bandwidth. Right. But by not kind of taking part in that, right, we don't get the opportunity to help people succeed. And that would be my one wish because we're, and I'm assuming Yusuf is the same way. Another thing besides, we're picking up the phone for us to help them is just allowing us to, make sure everything's working and things like that. And oftentimes too, there's technical issues that we could fix that would dramatically change the game for them. And we've had issues where people, their APIs have failed or, whatever, labor edge exploded and they're missing lead flow and we just cannot even get them on the phone and they're going through answer your damn phones. That's my wish.
Thanks, guys. As we talked about before, you both work with a wide range of agencies and sometimes, especially in this market, things get tough. It's never easy to see an agency struggle, especially one of your partners, but it's something that we're all familiar with in this market. And at the end of the day, we want to do everything we can to help agencies get back on track. But a big part of that is figuring out why they're struggling in the first place. So our next question is, what's a red flag that you can spot instantly when you're talking to a struggling agency?
I think it goes off the same topic, which is recruiter engagement. So if recruiters are not highly engaged, they're not trained well, then that's often a big red flag. There are some things that are outside of the control of the agency. So if your job supply is not strong and you don't have good relationships with the MSPs and VMSs, it's just going to be difficult for you. It's going to be an uphill battle. So for us as job boards, if you're coming to us with limited job supply or job supply that's highly competitive, meaning as soon as you submit a candidate, there's already 20 submissions in front of you, that's often very difficult for any job board to work with. And then recruiter engagement, I think the only way that you can really counteract some of the difficulties that exist in the market conditions today is by having stellar recruiters. So if your recruiters are extremely engaged, much more engaged than, let's say, a large staffing company that has you beat on job supply and on relationships and direct job supply specifically, then you can beat them by having more engaged recruiters. So more engaged recruiters means maybe they're working after hours when recruiters of a large agency are not working. That's one way to do it. Maybe they're picking up the phone more. Maybe they're trying harder with each individual lead. And the way that, one way that you can do that is by improving their commission structures. So if you're a lean, small agency, you can improve the commission structures of your recruiters to incentivize them more to be hungrier than that of a large staffing company.
Yeah, and I would say red flags for us would be kind of unrealistic expectations. You kind of have these calls with agencies as they're onboarding, and my favorite one is like, can we do a 1-week trial? Like, can we just have access to the platform for 3 days? Or we want to have 50 placements in month 1. And we look at these type of partners and we're like, we won't even let them on the board because we're just going to take their money, right? And that's not what we do. But unrealistic expectations from the get-go are one. And then 2, I would say where they're telling us what they want and not what they need. Do you know what I mean? And I'll piggyback up what Yusuf was talking about. So like, you have an agency, let's just say agency 1, right? And they, 2 or 3 recruiters, they're, high MSP, they're not very price competitive. They have maybe rookie recruiters or newer recruiters, and they're going up against these MSPs and VMSs with all the best agencies in the country, right? Like they're going up against the veterans. I'm looking online here, like Andy, right? The One Staffs, well, for that matter, the True Staffs, the Atlases, like they're going up against there, right? And they want that active lead flow that's applying to jobs. Those candidates are probably going to apply to a couple different jobs, which means that agency 1, that rookie agency that has, just jumped on a bunch of VMSs, they're going to have to go up against the A squad, right? So yes, they may want that because logically speaking, that makes sense, right? Well, these guys are applying to our jobs. Yeah, you're absolutely right. However, you're going to be an uphill battle against an agency that has, a much larger infrastructure than you. So we may recommend, for example, a more passive approach, right? To go backwards, right? So instead of taking a candidate to a job, take a job to a candidate, because there's going to be less noise, there's going to be less competition, and it is more work, but they're going to do better. And we've seen agencies in this category do better in the passive approach, like by a factor of 10. But if we go and explain that to an agency and they're like, no, we want this. And we just know how our platform is going to work for that persona of agency. Like we know, we've been doing it for 17 years, we know. And if we can't set them up for success, we won't work with them. So those are kind of the red flags we look at.
And the most difficult thing is if the recruiter can't maneuver a candidate to another job because the job supply is limited, then they won't be able to get the placement. Large staffing companies oftentimes will have a large enough job supply that they can maneuver the candidate to another job. What's interesting is we often see 80% plus of the candidates that apply to a job not actually getting placed to the job that they've applied for,
right?
Which means the recruiter's ability to sell and maneuver the candidate and recommend additional jobs is where placements are made.
Yeah. I mean, and some of it's not even like, there's 2 sides to that. There's job inventory and then there's recruiter skill. Like redirecting is the same as objection handling, and it is difficult. If you ask 10 CEOs or 10, VPs of recruitment, they're going to tell you that redirects are one of their biggest challenges with their recruiting teams. It's very difficult to get somebody who's heart set on going to one place and one place only. But the other part of it is job supply, right? If you're like an agency that just does the East Coast, or you have a concentration in like the Northeast, for example, and somebody goes to like, I don't know, Des Moines, Iowa, You may not have a ton of, whatever, med-surg shops in Des Moines, Iowa. You have nothing to offer them. So now you're back in the redirect game. So again, you have to be honest with yourself as an agency and, in coordination with your partners, like your marketplaces like us, so we can help show you how to use our products for your success and benefit. And that may be different than what you want or think. So, it's a little bit of trust.
Awesome. I do want to talk about metrics a little bit and what metrics matter, which ones don't, and how agencies and job boards can get aligned on what really matters. I know, Oliver, you've spoken a lot before about how important it is for an agency and a job board who are working in a partnership together to be aligned on how they define success. So from your perspectives, what is one underused metric that recruiters should be obsessing over?
I think an obvious one is time to contact as a job board. So how quickly are candidates receiving a response from recruiters? Oftentimes you're going to be competing with recruiters that are able to get back to candidates within minutes. I think another one is the number of submissions per candidate. So this market condition is super competitive, which means you have to submit candidates to multiple jobs, because the odds that if you just submit them to one job, the odds you get that placement is rare. So you do have to maneuver around the job supply that you have and try to recommend them to several jobs, submit them to several jobs. And then the last one is probably the time to submit. So the first submission is oftentimes going to be the most competitive. So if you're able to get the submission packet in as quickly as possible, submit them as quickly as possible, you'll be competitive with other agencies.
Yeah, I would say one KPI that I really like. So to your point, it depends on what you're trying to evaluate, right? So if you're trying to evaluate like us as a marketing platform, then my favorite KPI is not actually placing, it's CMAs, candidates made active. So how many of the candidates reproduced you? Did you have active conversations that you got on the phone that were legitimate? Maybe not, even not necessarily qualified for the job you hope they take or the assignment you hope they take. Or were they real nurses looking to travel? Whether they could go on that job, wanted to go on that job is different, right? And some of our most successful partner agencies and some of our largest, they use this model. They use the CMA metric because their candidates made active score, which we happen to be in some of the higher ones of, allows them to say, hey, we couldn't place him, but that's not you. You gave us a quality nurse. You gave us a quality nurse who was interested to go. We just couldn't, we couldn't get him on that VMS assignment. They closed or they weren't interested or whatnot. Well, we're going to get him. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe next month, maybe 3 months from now, we're going to get him. So CMA is really important. And then I guess also we know that, most of both Yusuf and I, clinicians aren't applying to just one job, and you wouldn't either if you were a nurse, right? You would apply to a couple different jobs, get some couple different options, anywhere between 2 to 4, 2 to 5. Sometimes by itself is what we see. We know that 80% of the time, the agency who calls first is the one that's going to get them. We know that after 2 hours of waiting from the time the lead comes in, your chance of connecting initially with that candidate drops by 50%. We know that. And we also know that, the faster you get in there and the more relationship you're going to have built, within that first call, you're also going to be able to demystify or close against a higher price, right? So it's not always pay rate. Sometimes building that relationship, we've seen people that were the first people to call in with lower pay rates and less offerings still win the lead, right? Because they built that relationship. So time to call is huge. And then also, again, number of submissions, 5 to 7 submissions is what we're seeing as far as, I think NATHO talked about, right, Yusuf? 5 to 7, 5 to 8, depending on the modality. A lot of times we're hearing agencies just submitting them to 1 or 2. It's not a plan A or a plan B like it was a couple years ago. It's really plan A through G at this point.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And just speaking a little more to what Oliver was saying, all of those statistics and tips are things that we have started incorporating into our recruiter trainings. Another shameless plug here, but it's a very helpful thing that we're offering to our clients. So if you're a client on this call and you are hearing those statistics and you're getting a little bit scared, definitely sign up for one of our recruiter trainings because we dive in a lot more into all of those things. We have a lot of great audience questions in the chat, so I am actually going to just ask one more question of each of you, and then we will turn to those. But like I said at the beginning of this session, the two of you are competitors, plain and simple. And a lot of people kind of shudder at the idea of working so closely with a competitor, but you've both managed to strike a great balance between competition and collaboration. And I'm curious how you think this approach could be applied more broadly across the industry. Or in other words, how can agencies or other job boards balance competition and collaboration within the industry to foster growth?
Yeah, I think we already see this among staffing companies. So staffing companies are very friendly in their competition. There's a bunch of conferences that they go to, and a lot of them are acquaintances and friends between each other, and they share their best practices, their lessons, the marketing channels that work best for them. And I think it's similar for Oliver and I, where we have a friendly competition where there's lessons that we've learned building these businesses and working with staffing companies. There's very few job boards that are within this niche. So we end up having very specialized knowledge where if we can learn from each other, then the entire industry benefits. And we both believe that this industry is large enough that if we're sharing lessons between each other, the market as a whole for us will just grow. So we'll be able to convert better with our customers. We'll be able to serve them better. And I think it's the same for staffing companies. Even at NATHO, we saw that a bunch of competitors were sharing insights on what's working best for them. I think in this down market, a lot of strategies have been shared between staffing companies of what might work so that you can get out of the downturn and kind of survive it. And it's really down to execution. So if somebody's sharing with you a key lesson on what might have worked for them, it's whether or not you're executing beautifully on that to capitalize on the advice.
Yeah, I mean, what's the phrase? Iron sharpens iron, right? Like, I think that, Yusuf and I have two very similar platforms, do things a little bit differently, but we come from different kind of worlds. But, I think we have the shared desire to move this industry forward and to clean it up a little bit, right? To put a little bit of humanity back into it, to make it a little bit more honest and ethical and, I want to say recruiter focused, but more agency focused. And we want to swing the pendulum back that way. And, we can complain about it and bitch about it, or we can actually get in and do something about it. So the other thing I think, like our podcast, for those of you you should check out our podcast on LinkedIn, but it really stems from Yusuf and I talking about, man, the industry is really depressed. There's a lot of pain with our agencies. Like our agencies are hurting, our partners are hurting. What can we do? And obviously, as much as we'd like to give our services away for free, we can't. But what can we do, right? We can take everything we've learned and what we're seeing and help our agencies do better. So we basically have went on this crusade of trying to give as much information to agencies and the recruiters, hence this conference, as we possibly can to kind of help out there. And that's our ethos, right? It's not just we don't make any money off the content that we give. We're all just trying to help the agencies. And Yusuf and I are aligned there. And we're also friendly. Like Yusuf came out to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We picked him up in a horse and buggy. It's like, he loved it. So anyway, so it's great. So yeah, we're really happy. I hope to do a lot more things with Yusuf vetted, and we'll still vigorously compete. But yeah, it's a friendly partnership.
Thanks, guys. I love those answers. We'll turn now to some audience questions. We have about 10 minutes, so we might not be able to get to them all, but if there's questions left over, we'll save them and shoot them over to Oliver and Yusuf to cover in the next podcast. So we'll start with David's question. He asks, how do you guys see AI-generated search responses affecting organic traffic to job boards and agencies now and then in the future as well?
Yeah. So I'll jump on this one because I'm actually just put together, we're going to be doing a webinar in about 2 or 3 months on this. It's actually, it's related to getting your jobs listed in ChatGPT and AI, specifically Gemini and stuff. I used to own an SE agency prior to this for many, many years, so I'm pretty solid on this stuff. So zero-click search results or Gemini AI is resulting in probably, I think it's like 10 to 20% less of an amount of clicks on Google, for example. So there's less traffic. The click-through rate, although, is up, even on less traffic. So what that means is you're getting more intentful clicks, but you're getting less of them. What that's doing is contributing to a little bit of drying up in the online landscape. So that's something to be considered. We do have a small amount of traffic moving over to things like ChatGPT and AI-driven search. There's like 3 or 4 different different ones besides ChatGPT. However, I don't know how much of this is long-term. I think there's always going to be bouncing back and forth. The other thing you have to consider is like ChatGPT's general algorithm is not updated in real time. It's updated several months, or 3 to 7 months. It's updated. So when you're querying, like for example, ChatGPT, like help me find a travel nurse job, you're hitting a database that's not current. It's older. They do have different job search engines that are updated more frequently. But again, it's still very, very early on in this. But yeah, Google is definitely suffering on a volume scale. And we've actually seen, for example, like Bing, believe it or not, see an increase in search market share over Google, which hasn't happened in ever. So maybe you guys don't even know who Bing is. Like, it's been so long. So anyway, yes, you got anything to add?
I think what we've seen is that AI search results are more or less indexing from Google search results. So it doesn't want to give you, it'll never try to give you a stupid answer. So if something is very low in the search results, it'll probably not surface that as a recommended result in the first place. So if you ever, search for jobs, for travel nurse jobs using ChatGPT, oftentimes it'll redirect you to a major site. So it'll redirect you to Indeed, or Monster or Career Builder, or it'll redirect you to a major agency like an AMN Healthcare or True Staff or whatever else. And it does those redirects because it's basically scraping existing content on search, and it's surfacing results that have already been ranked on Google search. So it's unlikely to give you a recommendation that isn't already popular. So more or less, if you're indexing highly on search results, you will probably show up on ChatGPT search results. But like Oliver said, a lot of these results are not real time. So at the end of the day, it's still going to redirect you to a job board site so that you can then apply to a job on the job board site. So it might give you a result, but a lot of times currently that result is out of date, and then it'll redirect you to Indeed. And if it's redirecting you to Indeed, then it's basically the same game that we're playing anyways, which is somebody's searching on Google for jobs, they're clicking on the Indeed link and then applying to a job on Indeed. So ChatGPT, it's not at the point where it's kind of an autonomous agent for you that's applying to jobs on your behalf. It's still redirecting you to a job board.
Yeah, you guys should check in that webinar when we do it. There's a lot of good stuff there. Very similar, not a total scrape, but if it ranks on one, it should rank on the other, but not always. So there's some specifics we'll go over in that.
I wanted to bring up a question that Allison had put in the chat. She had directed it more towards agencies asking their travelers this question, but I am curious to hear your perspectives. Oliver, you brought up about walking the kindergartner to the first day of class. And something that our team learned from NATHO was that the fall off rate for travel nurses is 22%. So what that means is that 22% of nurses are not showing up to their first day, even after they've been submitted and agreed and ready to go. And that's scary. So Allison asks, why are nurses ghosting their assignments? What is causing them to quit mid-assignment? What do you guys think the reasoning for this is?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. So we've actually looked at this extensively because we threw it to our product teams. Like, is there anything we as a platform can do to help, mitigate this, right? So the problem is right now is all these agencies, our partners, you guys here, we're all feverishly battling, vigorously for placements. And that doesn't subside to a candidate once they've been submitted or accepted an assignment. They're still going to get calls from everybody. And, while some agencies may say, oh, you're starting somewhere great, we'll call you in 3 months. Some agencies are going to be like, well, really, I can get you over here, just walk away. I mean, they're feverish, right? So I think it goes to kind of what we're talking about in session 1, building that relationship, right? If you like your recruiter, and you would actually feel shame by calling them and telling them or ghosting them that you've gone to another agency, that's going to help, right? But if you have only received text messages through a platform and you have no idea who this person is, and someone calls you and says, we'll pay you an extra $2 an hour to come over here, just walk away from that other agency, you'll never work with them again, you're going to do it. So we've actually had agencies tell us like, oh, this month we had a higher number of walkouts or whatever from TravelNurseSource. Your platform only delivers nurses who don't show up to their assignments. No, are we delivering nurses? It's the industry that's causing this, right? So you have to have that relationship. When we ask that person, like, when did you last talk to this nurse? They'll be like, well, when we gave them the offer, when they accepted the offer, and that was it, right? So you have to literally hold their hand, walk them to the first day of class, give them a lollipop, put them in school. That's it.
Yeah, I'd say this is less likely with large agencies. So if you're an AYA, for example, they will mark you as do not rehire. So you're less likely to walk away from a large agency that has a large job supply. If you're going to be contracting with a small agency, I think as a traveler, you're probably looking at it as there's a lot of small agencies. I have other offers. I'm going to walk away and take the higher paying offer. Yeah. So there's no incentive, especially if you don't build a relationship with that candidate. There's no incentive for you to be retained. The best is if you have a relationship with a recruiter and you've been on multiple assignments with the same recruiter.
Awesome. Thank you. We only have 3 minutes left, and I don't think that that's enough time to dive into some of these other questions. So I am going to save them, and hopefully you guys can cover them in your next podcast. But I want to thank both of you for being here today. This was a super fun chat. We are going to take our last 5-minute break. This conference has really flown by, but we'll see you back here for our final session of the day shortly.
See ya. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Hi, everybody, or welcome back if you're just now tuning in. We're so glad you're here. We just wrapped up session 4, which was an amazing conversation with Oliver and Yusuf about what they wish agencies knew. And now somehow we're already at our last session of the day. I'm really stoked to dive into this one. It's called Content That Clicks, Influencers That Convert, Your Social Media Marketing Playbook. For this session, we're joined by 2 incredible experts in influencer marketing, Sarah Gaines and Tracy Parsons. Sarah and Tracy, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourselves and give a little bit of background on who you are before we jump right into the questions.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sarah Gaines, also known as a 6-figure travel nurse. I've been in the industry for about 15 years, and I traveled for 10 of those years. During that time, I built a digital community of about 100,000 healthcare professionals across platforms, as well as my private community. So I'm really, really excited to share my perspective, not only as a travel nurse, but also an influencer and an entrepreneur who's been on both sides of the influencer collaboration. So excited to get into the tea.
Love it, Sarah. Thank you. Tracy, you want to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. My name is Tracy Parsons, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Flockity. Flockity is essentially influencer marketing for jobs. I've been doing recruitment marketing, employer brand work since the late 1900s. And I've got to watch all of this grow up and change and evolve. And Sarah and I have had some amazing conversations in preparation for this conversation. I am a huge fan. So I may fangirl a little bit on you, Sarah.
I love it. Well, I'm going to fangirl for both of you. I'm so pumped for this session. I think that you both bring such unique experience to the table, and I'm excited to hear how both of you will approach these questions. So without further ado, we'll dive right in here. We're going to be talking a lot about influencers and influencer marketing in this session, which is going to be really valuable to agencies who haven't explored these avenues yet. But even for those that have, you're going to get a unique perspective on the world of influencing, how to do it right, and the power that a great influencer strategy can have on your agency. We also have some nurses who signed up for TalentTrack. I'm not sure if they're tuning in live, but I think, Sarah, your perspective from being a travel nurse and kind of converting into an influencer role will be really helpful for those people to hear as well. So with that being said, some agencies are all in on influencer marketing and have really embraced it, while others are still maybe on the fence. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you think agencies might be hesitant to work with influencers, and how can this sort of trust gap be addressed?
I would say from my experience, most agencies are terrified to work with influencers because there's no guarantee on the return on investment. Like, there's just no guarantee on the ROI. And if you're not familiar with social media, it could feel very random and sporadic. You can't predict the metrics. You can know what metrics you want to look at, but there's just no guarantee. So a lot of their fear is based on, what if I spend all of this money on an influencer and I get no conversion, no views, whatever their goal may be?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it always goes back to control, right? So whenever there's anything new in our space, and again, please keep in mind, I was the jerk that was telling everybody in the universe to stop advertising in newspapers and start putting it on the internet. Like, this is when I say like the late 1900s, I was the one that was calling, hey, I saw that you had like a $6,000 line ad in the newspaper. Do you know you could put that on the internet for $200? And they would be like, wait, what? And so like, I've watched the evolution of all of this from the front row. And I will tell you that it always boils down to control. And exactly what you were saying, Sarah, like people are like, well, I need to control the message, and I need to control their followers, and I need to control this. Girl, you control nothing. You don't even control if you wake up tomorrow. Like none of this was within our control. And I think that the control issues that we have around where our jobs show up. What if somebody says something mean about our agency? What if somebody, like, you guys, if you take anything away from the words that come out of my face in this webinar, is that you don't control anything ever. So like, I'm going to ask everybody to start channeling their inner Elsa from Frozen and just let it go. It's beyond our control. And to Sarah's point, you don't know what it's going to produce in terms of results. That's why I've been in my work in influencer marketing as a business. Like that's what we do. We connect creators with job opportunities, and they distribute jobs on our customers' behalf. And we get that same question, like, well, what if somebody doesn't like it? What if they don't rate? That's the thing. You don't control. It is new. We are all learning this as we go along. So don't put all your eggs in the influencer basket. Like all of your budget should be 10% experimental anyway. So carve out some of that 10% and experiment.
I agree. And speaking of control, to answer like the second half of the question about, the fear and how to fill the gap, when it comes to control, I would say from an influencer perspective, the biggest turnoff that makes me not want to work with an agency is an agency that's trying to control your creativity. That's why we create content. You have to be very strategic about the type of influencer that you pick. And once you pick them, it's really important to trust them from there and trust their expertise. They obviously grew their community to where it is because of the skill that they have, and you're attracted to them for that reason. So be strategic in who you pick to work with and be very collaborative and less controlling. And that will help a lot with the partnership as far as like filling that gap.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that trust gap, that's where it comes across. Like Sarah, you bring things to the table as a creator, right? And I'm purposely and intentionally moving away from the influencer word because it makes people so prickly, right? Yeah. The reality is, Sarah, you create engaging content for travel nurses. They follow you because it's real and it's authentic and it's you, and it's a day in the life through your lens, right? And when you are selecting creators, you want to make sure that that is aligned with your brand. And in addition to like, trust you did not build a 6 to 7 figure following being an idiot. Like this is, right? You're drawing in the audience that these companies need, and they need to respect that. Like this is a symbiosis. It's not a control thing.
And I really like the point you just made. For me, I think there's a huge difference between an influencer and a creator. Right. I see myself as a creator. This is much deeper than me. For me, I think when people think of influencer, it's more cringy now because unfortunately many people have been burned by it. And also there's a difference between someone who has gone viral by luck, just happens to have a bunch of followers. And then now they're just taking brand deals, versus a true content creator who's been doing this, who has replicated their results on multiple platforms. That to me is the biggest difference between influencer versus content creator.
Well, and I get the question all the time, like, is Mr. Beast going to share my job? No, Mr. Beast is not going to share your job. Why would he do that? Why would you want him to do that? Like, what are you talking about, right? We're not talking Kardashians. We are talking about people who are very dedicated to sharing information about their profession.
Yeah, so that leads into our next question about what you guys are saying, the importance of finding the right influencer or content creator for your brand. So what key things should agencies look for in that sort of selection process to ensure that the influencer they pick is aligning with their brand and their goals?
Yeah, and I'll start, Sarah, and then chime in. Flockity, we work with hundreds of influencers, right, in a variety of categories. And we have a vetting model. Like you can't just sign up and be a Flockity influencer. Like there is vetting. We are looking at your follower count, not just your follower count. That's great. You're adorable. To Sarah's point, like maybe you went viral once and you got 200,000 followers. because you went viral once because your baby was swearing or what have you. Swearing babies get me every time. But it's again, it's not the follower count, it's the engagement. Sarah, you're building a community. Do you have the attention? Are you engaging? Like, are you engaging with that following? So are you just pumping out content, or are you really having a conversation with the person building community? We're looking at the frequency and the recency. Like, are they creating consistent content? Is this a consistent content that's about their job? And lastly, we look and see if they're brand friendly. Like, are they popping off on things that the average TA person would not be comfortable with? Then no, that is not an influencer for Flockity.
I love that. I agree with everything that you said. I think what's really important when brands are looking for creators is make sure you are aligned and look at their previous content and what they choose to talk about all on their own. That will make the collaboration and the partnership so much more natural and so easy. I have brands reach out to me all the time and want me to talk about something I've never even posted on my page. And they're just like, well, yeah, you have a lot of followers and we're kind of in the niche and that's cool. No, find an influencer or find a creator that is aligned with your brand. And like you mentioned, Tracy, there's some creators that are a little bit more spicy, which can be good or bad depending on what tone your brand is. And also, I would like to add, before you even start looking for a creator, get aligned on your own brand and your own messaging and what the message you want to give out. It'll make the partnership much more cohesive. And as a creator, if I'm able to look at the brand and the tone versus I'm working with a brand who's very unclear on even what their message is or what their goal is, it makes the campaign much harder. And also, speaking of goals, every post should have a purpose. So when you are picking different creators, if the purpose of the campaign is just brand awareness, cool. Go with a nurse influencer who gets a ton of views, who has hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of views. If that is your goal, simply brand awareness. But if your goal is to get conversions, that is going to be a completely different approach that's going to require much more strategy.
Yeah, I think I like the point you brought up, Sarah. I think it's important to remember that while agencies are also trying to find if an influencer is the right fit for them, the influencer or the creator is also trying to determine if that brand is the right fit for them and their audience. Because as a creator, you want to be authentic to the audience you've built. You don't want to just accept every brand deal you could get because then nobody will trust you anymore. So I love that piece.
It is very symbiotic. I mean, it is very, it is collaboration at its truest core.
Yes.
Yes, I love that. Next, I want to talk about budget because that's obviously a concern that a lot of agencies might have when it comes to influencer marketing, especially agencies and marketing teams who struggle with limited budgets. So how can smaller agencies or agencies with limited budgets leverage micro influencers or brand ambassadors to achieve big results?
Sarah, do you want to start or do you want me to go?
Go ahead and start. I like piggybacking.
All right. Well, and so for me, budget is budget, right? What can you afford? And you talk to your creators about that, right? Like micro influencers that we work with, they'll charge $2,000 for a reel, right? So it should not break your bank. But then there are creators who are charging $50,000 for a reel. Like go get rate cards, go shop around. Micro influencers are anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000 typically followers, right? So they've got 1,000 to 10,000 followers. That's 50,000 for a reel. Honest to God, I questioned all of my life choices after that. I'm like, I have clearly, literally done this wrong. Like, oh my God. So yes, true story. But that's not everybody. Like that's people who have a couple million followers. But then there are creators who are part of collaboratives like Flockity who post on a cost per click basis. So like it really depends on what you're going for. And if it's a cost per click basis, no, you're not going to collaborate on a script. You're going to be paying for a reel because that's more that's more driving that awareness. But to Sarah's earlier statement, influencer marketing is an awareness play. Everybody, you guys got to need to know, like that. You are stopping the scroll. Like legitimately, somebody is on Instagram shopping reels. They're swiping TikTok. They're looking at funny animals and cute babies, and then they'll see something about a job. Like this is not it. It kind of is a pattern disruption moment. So it's like that. But find the right influencers. There's no like, yes, there are small budgets, but you have to test it, right? And I'm a big believer of 10% of your budget should be experimental anyway when it comes to job advertising. So what is 10% of your budget?
And speaking of budget, I would say also setting realistic expectations. So I like that Tracy, you just put the numbers out there.
I just say it.
Yeah. And setting those expectations with the results. I think, I've spoken with some companies that are hesitant or scared to work with creators because they're like, well, I worked with this one creator and we just got no return. I'm like, well, you offered them $5. So they gave you $5
right.
like that. You're going to get what you invest in. Also, when it comes to if you have a smaller budget and you want to work with a micro influencer, being strategic about the type of influencer that you choose, making sure that they're aligned with your brand and your image and your goals and whatever vision you have for your brand. But also what works really well is focusing on long-term partnerships versus just like one-off collaborations. And that actually is a win-win for everyone involved. A true content creator, especially if they're doing it full time, I stopped taking one-off collaborations. I was like, nope, unless we're building the brand together and we're working together for at least 6 months, it doesn't really make sense for me to put in all of my time and energy. So I think approaching these micro influencers who maybe they're still travel nursing and they're doing it on the side and it's something they want to transition into full time, that is a really great opportunity for you as a company to come in and say, hey, we would love to partner with you, not just one time. Like we could do this for 3, 6 months, even a year. And I know it can be scary as far as return on investment. You don't have to commit to a year from the start. You can just commit to a project. Hey, we're going to do this pilot post. We're going to work together for a month. We're going to see what the results are. We're going to have a debriefing, and then we'll create an entire strategy and campaign for the quarter or for the next 6 months or for the year. So just working in small steps so that way you're getting the results and that boosts your confidence as far as investing your money in that influencer. It'll also weed out influencers too, because when companies come to me and they're like, oh, well, can you do, we want to work with you long term, but can you do one post and let's see the results? I'm like, yes, because I know y'all going to pay more when y'all see these results. But some influencers are like, oh, I don't know, I'm a little nervous. So it's a really great process to test out the waters, like Tracy mentioned, experiment and see how it goes.
Experiment. Yeah. And one other thing to consider, the future of work, everyone, is income stacking. Okay, this is the future of work. There will be people with a full-time job, but they're income stacking with these side hustles, for lack of a better term. And this is you'll find a lot of micro influencers, creators who are consistent. They've grown a nice following. It's very, very collaborative. It's very community, and they don't want to charge. They don't charge a ton of money, but that's really big money for them because it's extra money. Like they're paying their rent with a video.
Yes, and also if you agree to do something more long-term versus one-off, that in itself has value. And so if you have a smaller budget, that may work in your favor. Because for me, I don't know, $10,000 for one post versus $50,000 for the next 4 months, like whatever, the longevity and consistency is more important than a bunch of money up front.
That leads perfectly into our next question, which is about building those long-term relationships instead of those one-off sponsorships. Because also, as your audience sees a one-off sponsorship, it doesn't feel as believable. It feels a little more salesy. And relationships have been a big theme today, and for good reason. Building strong, genuine connections is essential, especially in this industry. And one hesitation surrounding those influencer campaigns is that they can sometimes feel too sponsored. And obviously, sponsorship is definitely a part of it. People have to get paid for the work that they're doing for you. There is a lot of value in developing long-term collaborative relationships with influencers who truly align with your brand. It's more believable, it's more authentic. So I'm curious, from your perspectives, what strategies can agencies use to create those authentic and lasting partnerships rather than those one-off kind of salesy brand deals?
I think it's all about choosing the right creator that has a very strong community, strong connection with their community already, and a creator that already posts that natural content that doesn't feel sponsored. And the long-term approach makes such a huge difference. For me as a content creator, there's a difference between doing a one-off sponsorship versus knowing there's companies I've worked with for 6 years. And when I have this long-term relationship with this company, it's easy for me to be like, oh, let me just post this on my stories and talk. This popped up in my head. You just naturally start posting actually more content than what you're paid for, because you have this long-term relationship with them, and then your community starts to connect with them and they see you grow with the company. So I think the long-term partnerships, long-term commitment is a really good approach.
Yeah, yes. Like my answer is yes. That's the way to go. And to Sarah's point and to Carly's question, like there's an inherent feeling when something is over scripted, right? And you can tell that it feels wrong coming out of their mouths, because these creators are our friends in our minds, right? The people that I love, like Gus with the cat on TikTok, I know that guy now. Like we're gonna every time he comes on with Lockjaw, I lose it, right? So like I feel like I know him. And he does these great paid Chewy sponsorships. He does unboxing. But if he has something that feels very scripted and very off brand, off the Gus brand, I'm swiping, right? You've got it. Again, it goes back to that first question. Trust your creator. They have built this audience. They know what the audience is looking for, and allow them to infuse their voice into your brand to build more credibility and more trust. That's it.
Also, another thing I would add, in-person events make such a huge difference. And one of the travel nursing agencies that I worked with, when they reached out to me, our brands were already much aligned, because I love luxury, I love vacation, I love being by the beach, and their agency happens to be in California on the beach. So it was just the perfect collaboration. And we did lots of in-person events as well. So I think especially if you have a smaller budget, spending your money on an in-person event, it does not have to be super expensive at all. I think that's a really great way to get quality leads. And it also doesn't have to be a huge event. There was another agency that I worked with this was like in 2017. I did an event and it was only 30 people, but in order to qualify for the event, oh my gosh, I can't remember in order to qualify, you had to have the experience, like you had to have 2 years of experience, et cetera, et cetera. And you had to actually fill out an application with the agency, and they charged $100 fee, but the fees returned to you if you show up to the event. And at the event, I talked about travel nurse contracts, how to land your first contract. And then there was recruiters there to help them get started, 100% show up rate. And 29 of the 30 nurses ended up doing a contract and completing it. So
Yeah.
it's all about quality leads. It doesn't have, that event was not a lot of money. They rented an event center. I think we had some mimosas and some like charcuterie boards. And I talked about travel nursing for a few hours. Like that was literally it. So there's definitely creative ways to go about it.
Very.
Yeah. That's super cool. I think seeing somebody who you normally just see behind a screen actually in front of you reminds you that they're human and that they're a person.
They're real people.
Yes, you're real. I do want to touch on something that we talked about earlier, which was control. And you guys have already hit on this a lot, but I'm wondering your perspectives on how agencies can balance creative control while allowing the influencers that they pick to maintain their authentic voice. What kind of strategies are there?
Don't over script. They know their audience. I mean, I know that it sounds like what I'm saying is so flippant. Like, how do we do that? So what we do, and we hire creators to promote Flockity to other creators. Like that's what we do sometimes. And nobody likes starting from a blank piece of paper, right? So we give them some ideas and then they tear it to shreds and they get it back to me what they would say. And I'm like, great, we got it in spirit. It's just you got to let go.
Yes. And I think,
and then it won't sound like an ad. Go, Sarah.
yes, I agree. Script versus guideline.
Yes.
As a content creator, I will tell the company I'm not working with a script because I'm not going to sound like me. However, give a guideline, give key points. What are things that you really want to focus on? What's the overall message that you want to give? And then from there, trust my creativity as a content creator and say, what do you think that we could do from here? This is the result that we want. How can we get to the outcome? That's literally what you're hiring them for, not just for the influence, but for the creativity. So let them thrive in their creativity and they'll probably produce something that was beyond what you could have imagined.
The audience follows them, not you. I'm just saying.
That's true. I mean, yeah, exactly. I have another question to throw in here. What trends do you think are coming in influencer marketing in the coming year? What should we watch out for? What have you seen already?
I would say for me, as far as trends, nurses are looking for connection. I think the, pandemic obviously had a huge effect on it. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot. I think the content creators that are very focused on community, not going viral, not building followers and views. The creators that have a strong, tight-knit communities are going to be the ones that have the most influence. And if you are a company that is able to partner with that creator for a longer period of time, not just one-off sponsorship, and do in-person events with them to deeper that connection, I think that's where it's at.
Yes, it's it's relationships and community, just like Nora put in the chat. Like it is relationships and community. That is the trend. And when we're talking about nurses specifically, Sarah, you know this better than I do. Like this is a cohort of people who are pretty burned out. And the sad thing is that there, according to me, there's a hierarchy of work, right? There are jobs. People have jobs. There are careers. I have one of those. And there are callings. Sarah has one of those, right? So nurses are really in that calling area. And the creators, the trend that I see, the creators that are building the strongest community are really, I'm not going to say telling it like it is, but they're telling it like it is, right? Like they're being honest about what it's like to work as a nurse right now. Like it's not easy. Patients are difficult. There is team dynamics. There is the whole healthcare space is very messy. And the more they talk about that, which can make it scary for brands to partner, right? Like, so then you're like, ooh, but they're talking about that it's hard. I'm here to tell you, everybody knows it's hard. It's not a secret. It's hard. You know it's hard. It's hard being a nurse. It's hard finding nurses. Work is hard. Jobs are hard. That's why they pay us to come.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I know a lot of companies are afraid of the person they're working with saying anything negative, but the best content is the most honest and transparent content. So and I can tell you this from experience. You can get on social media and be like, oh my God, travel nursing's so perfect and it's amazing. I love my assignment and I travel. And no one's falling for that anymore. Like, it's okay to be real and say, yeah, I'm on this assignment right now and it's a struggle, but shout out to my recruiter because they really empowered me and they were an advocate for me. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but blah, 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 blah. That is going to resonate so much deeper and it's so much more realistic than the perfect positive script because perfection just isn't even, people just aren't falling for that anymore. Let's be real.
Your thumb can't move fast enough for that garbage content. Like, be like, no, right? Like the world we live in right now is not adorable. So let's stop pretending that it is.
Also, I would like to talk about, I call them the invisible insights because when companies reach out to me and they want to look at my insights, they're always focused on the wrong things. They're usually focused on typically views, but some of my invisible insights that I think you guys should really look for is, first of all, when you ask a content creator to view their insights, don't look at the overall average of their content because not all the content is going to be about the topic that you want. If you have an influencer that's very diverse and they talk about makeup one day and travel nursing another day and their dog another day, and the video of their dog went viral, then their insights are going to be skewed. I asked for insights on like the top 3 posts that are most similar to the type of content that you're looking for. Also, the invisible insights that people don't pay attention to that are more important than views are shares and saves. If people are sharing and saving the content, that means that they are connected to the content. And another really great insight that no one pays attention to is story views. That's the tea. If you have a content creator that has a very high amount of people viewing their stories, from my experience, that has gotten the highest conversions because people will check your stories, they will watch it, and they will click whatever you tell them to click. And those are typically very, very warm leads. And if you have formed a partnership with this content creator, that gives them time to warm up their audience in their stories for a few weeks or for a few months before they tell them to click whatever the link is to get them to convert.
Yeah, shares and saves are a big indicator for us as well. One of the other things that we've noticed in all of the data that we send, because we send traffic to jobs, right? We send traffic to our customers' jobs. And what we have found is that when we send traffic, first of all, 98% of the traffic that we drive has never been to your site before. So this is in a very untapped market. So you collaborate with Sarah, you collaborate with Flockety, you are getting brand new people to your brand, right? So that's why we talk about it as an awareness channel. The other thing is that how many jobs they look at when they're at your site. So we find that they are shopping significantly, visiting anywhere between 5 and 10 different jobs before choosing the one they would like to apply for. So they may have landed on one job, but that now they're starting to shop. And that's why shares and saves are so important, because that save means that that's in there. They have intention. The share button is intention, right? And if they save that, if it's a save, they've saved it, they're going back to it. They mean to go back to it. And that's the gold.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of those invisible insights. So thank you for sharing those, Sarah. I was going to ask about.
Sarah, I'm stealing that.
Steal it.
I'll totally credit you. I will totally clock you for it every time. I'm like, so this really smart woman. But yeah, invisible insights is gold.
That's so good. I'm going to ask one last question here before we turn to a couple questions in the chat. But influencer marketing can feel like a whole new world when you're just getting started. There's so many platforms, creators, and strategies to kind of pick and choose from. So in your experience, what's the best way to dive in? Or in other words, what advice would you give to agencies just starting to explore influencer marketing, and where should they start?
I would say start with, for me, the biggest mistake companies make when they reach out to me is they don't understand the purpose of their content. And they're lucky I'm nice, because I'd be like, I'm not the influencer you should work with. You should work with this other person.
I could be more mean.
I could be more mean. I could just take your money, because there's some times where I'm like, no, we're not aligned. When I sit on the phone and I talk to you and I realize what your actual goal is. For some companies, their goal is, we just want awareness and we want a visibility and we want millions of people to view. Okay, that's not me. I'm more on the strategic side. I'm more of connecting and getting high conversions versus high views. So getting crystal clear on the purpose of your campaign. What is the campaign and what is the purpose? If it is it brand visibility? Is it connection? Is it engagement? Is it conversions? And I know y'all are all probably thinking, okay, we want it all. I get it. But if you're trying to chase everything, you're going to be mediocre at all of it and not just really great at one thing. So I would just focus on one thing. Maybe it is just building your page at first and getting that brand awareness. Then look for a creator that does that. Maybe you have a pretty good following with your social media, but you're looking for engagement and connection. That's going to be a different type of creator. Maybe your biggest thing is like, I don't even care about followers. I want these people to convert. Find a micro influencer that talks specifically about your topic, and they will get people to convert. It may not be hundreds and thousands of views, but what if it was 100 nurses that convert? That's a big deal.
Right. Yeah. And I would just piggyback on that. You have to start somewhere, and you have to where you have to start is exactly what Sarah is saying. You have to know what you want to accomplish. Right. So how does this fit into your broader strategy? If it's something that you want to test the waters in, go deeper than that. Like, oh, we're just exploring. Well, what are you exploring? Where does this fit into your funnel? Where does this fit into your buy? What is the need? What is the thing you want it to do? And then go from there. Right. And I'm just going to say this. Y'all are recruiters and sourcers usually. That's your whole job. Just now recruit and source an influencer.
Thank you both. I love that. Sarah, we have a couple questions directed mainly to you in the chat. I think a lot of people are really interested in learning more about your background as both a travel nurse and, on the flip side, a content creator. So Jordan asked, what was your most successful brand partnership?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say my most successful brand partnership was actually a win-win for both parties, because I'm so glad you asked this question, because I feel like me and the brand came up with a very collaborative way to work together that was extremely profitable for both parties. But it didn't require the brand to pay me a bunch of money up front, because they were unsure and I was unsure. But at the time, I was building my community, Six-Figure Travel Nurse. And I had a couple thousand followers on Instagram. I don't remember how many, but I want to say it was like around like 15,000. And that company was just starting their page. And they were like, okay, what can we do to work with you, to work together? We don't have very much money. I'm like, well, if you don't have very much money, what am I supposed to do? But I actually responded to them. I'm like, okay, well, you guys want to grow your audience on Instagram, and I want to grow my email list. So how can we find a way to do an even exchange? So basically what we decided to do was I did a live webinar, and that's actually how they found out about me, because I was doing webinars about travel nursing. So I did a live webinar that was specifically about travel nursing, and of course included them and had one of their recruiters on as a guest during the webinar. So of course that got them a ton of leads and a ton of exposure. And I did the live webinar, instead of doing it on my Instagram, I did it on their Instagram. So I told everyone, if you want to watch it, you got to follow them and go over on their Instagram. And then to promote the live webinar, we agreed for them to send all of my Instagram info to their email list. So what ended up happening was we did this several times. They grew. I think they have more followers than me. They exploded. It was a great partnership. And then for me on, my business, my email list grew a ton. And so even though I didn't get a ton of money from them up front, I ended up making hundreds of thousands of dollars on the back end from my email list that they helped grow. So it was win-win. So that was definitely one of my best partnerships.
Love it.
You've got to be creative with creators.
Yes, you gotta be creative. That was really great. And I would say another, I've done a couple of really great partnerships. For me, I think this is another like win-win situation for the company as well as the creator. I really love doing like commissioned based partnerships with a flat rate up front, because as a creator, you always want to be paid for the content that you create. But if you are the company that has a smaller budget, you can always offer the flat rate up front and then say, hey, depending on how many people convert, we'll give you X amount of money. Or I know, Tracy, you do clicks and stuff like that. There's different ways that you can leverage like the commission base or affiliate link type things. You do have to be a little bit more creative. But for me, that's been really, really lucrative. And I feel like it takes a lot of the risk away from the company, because you're only giving money to the creator based off of the results that they get. So it's a win-win.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. I love that. And then we have a fellow travel nurse in the chat. She said she's a follower of you. She's been watching you for a long time. So she wanted to know, do you have a preference on working with bigger agencies or smaller agencies, bigger brands, smaller brands, or what do you think?
I don't have a preference, because I believe you should always work with multiple, and you should always have a mixture of both. A couple of larger companies that you work with, because the pros of the larger companies is they typically have a larger amount of job opportunities to choose from, but sometimes the recruiter isn't as available. You may not have as much support, or also the benefits of these smaller companies is they may have less jobs, but they have their unfair advantage typically in a specific region that they're focusing on. So when I was travel nursing, I loved California. That was my place to go. And I loved Texas. That was my place to go. So there are a lot of small companies that I work with because they only do Texas. And they have so many job opportunities in like Houston and Dallas. And then even like the larger companies that I work with, they won't even have the job opportunities that the smaller companies have. So the answer to that question is build a team of recruiters that's a mixture of both, and then compare your opportunities from there.
Love it. Thank you. We are running a little bit out of time here. So I just wanted to thank both of you for coming and talking about all of this today. I really loved this session. I feel like I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience learned a lot as well. So thank you both for being here. If there's anyone who's tuning in who wants to start working with influencers or up their strategy a little bit, I highly encourage you to talk to both of these women. Clearly they know a lot of what they're talking about. So I encourage you to get in touch with them. And I am actually going to kick both of you off the screen so that you don't have to be there for our little outro. But thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Okay. All right, everybody. That is officially a wrap on our first ever Talent Track, which is insane. I can't believe that 4 hours have flown by. A huge thank you again to all of you in the audience for tuning in, and a big shout out to all of our incredible speakers who shared their time, energy, and expertise with us. We're super grateful, and we know that the audience gained a lot from your sessions, so thank you again. For those of you who missed anything over the last 4 hours or want to go back and revisit any of the discussions, there will be a replay of the entire conference available shortly within Livestorm, but we'll also be posting the video to our YouTube channel, so it will live on forever and you can go back and watch it at any time. Also, keep an eye out on your email inbox today. I'll be sending an email with a quick feedback form. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a couple minutes to fill that out. Let us know what you thought about Talent Track and what we can do to make next year even better. If you don't want to wait a whole year for more content like this, Track 5 hosts webinars throughout the year tackling topics that matter most to you. So be sure to watch out for those as they come up. Also, feel free to follow Track 5 on LinkedIn or connect with our CEO, Oliver Feekins. He posts a lot of great content literally almost every day. So there's a lot of great content on both of those pages. And then finally, if you're interested in generating leads or exploring a partnership with TravelNurseSource, AlliedTravelCareers, or LocumJobsOnline, you can get in touch with our account executive, Nora. Her contact information is on the screen. She's also been the one chatting with you all in the chat. She'd love to connect and get to know you and your agency more and explore how we can help you meet your staffing goals. So thank you all again for joining us at TalentTrack. This has been so much fun, and we can't wait to see you at our next event. I am going to leave this on for the next 10 minutes. So if you want to chat and talk to anybody in the chat, we'll leave it open. But thank you again for being here. Bye.